Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The July 10th, 2019 meeting of the Anne Arundel County Board of Education will now come to order. Please stand for today's invocation, followed by the pledge. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance. Stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to this meeting of the Board of Education. This meeting is being televised live on AACPS TV and live streamed on the internet. General information and protocols for the meeting are posted on the sign by the doorway as you enter the room, so please make sure you read those if you have not already. Item 2.03 is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or edits to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Item 2.04 is establish agenda order. We have one edit that we'd like to make at this time, and to make that motion, I'd like to defer to our newest member, who we'll introduce momentarily, but Ms. Alvey.
State law requires that this board vote on its officers at its annual meeting in July. Given that, I move that we take item 7.01, election of board officers, out of order earlier in our meeting and conduct the item after the presentation on mental health task force, which is item 3.01 on the agenda.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Any discussion on that? See none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. At this time, would any member like to add anything else to the agenda that's not currently on the printed agenda? Seeing none, then the agenda will stand as revised. Item 2.05 is board recognitions, and today we have no formal recognitions, but I'd like to welcome a couple of special guests that we have with us in the audience. First, County Executive Steuart Pittman. Mr. Pittman, thank you for being here. With him as well, he has his Chief of Staff, Jennifer Purcell. And then we also have Adrienne Mickler, who is the Executive Director of the Anne Arundel Mental Health Agency. Thank you for being here as well. Today is also a very, very special day for us because it is our first meeting of the new fiscal year. We are very honored to welcome our newest member of the Board of Education, the 46th student member of the Anne Arundel County Board of Education, Rita Alvey.
Good morning. Thank you to this Board of Education for a warm welcome. I look forward to working with you. I would also like to thank the students of Anne Arundel County for not only their encouragement and support for me to pursue this position, but for gifting me the honor to serve all of you and the greater Anne Arundel community. I believe that the Board of Education holds immense power and potential to better our county, and I hope to act as a unifier among the differing ideologies reflective of the diversity of thought in our school system to push the needle forward on big issues. I plan to focus on mental health, equity, and diversity in my short but already valued 1 year's time. Thank you, and I look forward to the coming year.
Thank you, Ms. Alvey, and welcome to the board. Today, Mr. Leib is not with us for a very, very special reason. As many know, he is a retired naval officer and proud graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, but today he's a proud father-in-law. He's asked me to read the following statement. I sincerely regret having to miss our July 10th Board of Education meeting. However, my wife and I will be traveling to Wilmington, North Carolina to attend the change of command for Marine Heavy Helicopter Squadron 366. Completing his highly successful command tour, my son-in-law, Lieutenant Colonel Wyland Ledbetter, will be relinquishing his command at the squadron of 15 CH-53 helicopters, the largest helicopter in the U.S. Armed Forces. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event steeped in tradition and pageantry, and one that I simply cannot miss. Semper Fi. So thank you, Mr. Leib, and I wish to say thank you to your son-in-law for his service. Also, one last welcome. I'd like to officially welcome, on behalf of Dr. Arlotto, Jennifer Lombardi, the Senior Manager for School and Family Partnerships. Thank you for being here today, and welcome. Item 2.06, school and community highlights. Any board members wish to? There we go. There they are. Mrs. Ellis.
Well, things have died down a little bit now, so I just have one thing I want to mention was the annual, AACPS conference.
Leadership conference?
The leadership conference. I was able to attend that, and I was blown away by the experience. There's a whole lot of energy and excitement among our leadership staff, and I was honored to take a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Ms. Schalheim.
Good morning. Thank you. Yes, I also attended the Unlocking Your Potential conference, and it was amazing. And it was like, for me, it was like going to a restaurant with too many amazing choices. And I would have loved to have attended nearly all of the breakout sessions. The ones I did get to, the ones, because you choose one per time slot, were incredible. And I especially loved the one about Diversity Week. Some folks from Glen Burnie were there. They were amazing. The wheel, and then identifying all the things that, all your characteristics, so it could be like gender and nationality and favorite sports team or whatever it is. I thought was a great way to unify people, because we're more alike than we are different. And kudos to all the staff involved. It was, I just loved it. I also, along with several of us, attended Miss Elvie's swearing in, and it was just a wonderful and proud moment for our community, for her and her family. We're all parents up here, and so it was, I'm sure it was a proud moment for your family. It was definitely amazing to see the student's voice represented again, and I can already tell that the shoes are being filled just fine. And then this afternoon we're going to, as a little outing, a bunch of us are gonna go see and tour Goshen Farms. And for those who might not know, that's a historic property on the Broadneck Peninsula that includes an 18th century farmhouse on a mostly wooded 22-acre property that's actually owned by AACPS. And I just can't wait to see the property. I've never been, and learn about the programs that occur there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mrs. Hummer.
Yes, again, I'll give a shout out to Helen Matioski and her crew with professional development. Once again, the conference was wonderful, and I love that that conference includes all of our staff across all areas. It wasn't just principals, it wasn't just senior staff, it was everyone, and everyone having a chance to learn there. While we're saying it's slow, everybody here is still working really hard. I was at an event last night, and I spoke with 2 teachers who are participating in curriculum writing for the summer. So hats off to the staff, the teachers who were still delving in with professional development and curriculum writing all this summer long. And my kids and I have made it out to several of the summer's meals sites to get lunch, and I encourage everybody to do it. The food is good, and it's a great way to go. We have them all over the county, so check the website and bring your kids out and get free lunch Monday through Thursday for the next 5-6 weeks.
Thank you, and I'll just add a very special thank you to Ms. Matioski and the entire team for the conference, and whoever added in the School of Rock Beatles. Thank you for that. Obladi Oblada and Love Me Do, 2 great classics. So thank you for such a great conference. Any other school and community highlights? Seeing none, we'll move to item 2.07, which is the PTA report. Is there a report today? No report. Item 2.08, CAC report? No report. Okay. We'll move to item 3.01, which is a special presentation, the Mental Health Task Force.
Good morning, President Gillen, members of the Board of Education, and Dr. Arlotto. For the record, I am Monique Jackson, Deputy Superintendent for Student and School Support. I am providing information on the formation of the Mental Health Task Force as requested at the May 15th meeting of the Board of Education. I am joined today by Ms. Sally Egan, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, Mr. Ryan Vogelin, Director of Student Services. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share the plans for the development of the Mental Health Task Force. In addition to these two members of our Anne Arundel County Public Schools team, I want to recognize the Honorable Steuart Pittman, Anne Arundel County Executive, Ms. Jennifer Purcell, Mr. Pittman's Chief of Staff, and Ms. Adrienne Michler, who is with me today, Executive Director of the Anne Arundel Mental Health Agency. Their presence here today represents the true partnership between Anne Arundel County Public Schools and the Anne Arundel County government. The goals of the task force are to identify contributing factors to increasing mental health needs of our students, better coordinate services and communication between and among school system, county government, and service providers, identify proactive measures and best practices, and make recommendations for improved delivery of services to children and families. The task force will seek to identify various factors leading to the increase in mental health issues among children. They will identify services both in and out of school to assist students needing mental health support, determine areas for greater collaboration, and identify changes in those areas such as parenting trends, community activities and resources, educational practice, and the environment that could all lead to a steady reduction in mental health issues. As I stated in my opening remarks, this task force is a true partnership between Anne Arundel County Public Schools and the County Executive's Office. As such, the participants will include representation of students, families, school system staff, government, and community. The membership will be inclusive, yet focused, so that the goals can be met and our children can best be served. In the interest of being transparent, the initial meeting of the task force will be open to the public, though the task force will not take public testimony. We are grateful that Mr. Vogelin and Ms. Michler have agreed to co-chair the task force. The initial meeting will take place in September, with subsequent meetings in November, January, and March, with a final report to the Board of Education in May. Subcommittees will be formed as needed and may meet on a different schedule. The outcomes for the meetings will be to develop an overview of services provided through Anne Arundel County Public Schools and Anne Arundel County government agencies, conduct a gap analysis, establish subcommittees, and provide recommendations for next steps. The task force will report its findings publicly to this board in May. That concludes our presentation, and we are open to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jackson. Before we move to board questions, I'd like to welcome to the podium County Executive Pittman. I know he has a few remarks he'd like to make.
Thank you. And I want to thank the board for requesting that this task force be created. I think one of the ways that you can measure the success of government is the health of its people. I would like to be judged that way. Our transition committee told us that we should be every piece of legislation the county does should have a health note with it. And I also, I believe that parents judge their own success and their kids' success based on mental health. Grades are great. Standardized tests are great, but if kids aren't happy and well-adjusted, that's where the problems lie. So we knew that when I came in, we looked at what the previous administration had done out of its office. Not My Child was one of the successes. It was a way to bring parents together around their concerns for their kids. It was focused on addiction. And we were pretty clear right away that we wanted to do something similar but focus on mental health of our youth. And so when you all came up with the idea of this task force, And I sit down with Superintendent Arlotto about once a month and have a freewheeling conversation, and I usually throw out a lot of questions, and one was, what about this mental health task force? And based on everything we had talked about, it was a no-brainer that this should be a county and school board thing. If you look at the list of agencies that are going to be involved, they're largely county agencies. So I had met with the students from Our Minds Matter. I had met with the parents from the Stop Bullying group. And I had been at the schools, the Arlotto's event at Chesapeake Middle School about bigotry and hatred, and all of those are bringing the community together with the school district and bringing the rest of county government together with the school district. So I am looking forward to this this task force being created, and probably stop in on a few meetings if I'm invited, and out of it we really intend to do something robust out of our office, and I know that you will do things as well, and we want to be measured based on our success. So thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. I will now turn to board questions. Mrs. Ellis.
First of all, County Executive, thank you so much for reaching out and partnering with our schools. This is a project that's very, very dear to me. I am so excited to see this moving forward, and I can't thank you enough for your support. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I envisioned this a couple months ago, and to be here at this point and see your presentation, it's turning into exactly what I wanted to see happen for our students. So I'm very excited about it. Thank you for all of your hard work, and I know there's other people behind the scenes that have been working on this. So thank you, everyone. Can we get hard copy or digital copy of the presentation?
Yes,
ma'am. Okay, great. I wasn't able to review in detail, since it was a brief presentation, the members of the task force. So I'd love to look at that more closely and just sort of process it. But this is just looking marvelous. I'm so excited to see this get started.
Thank you. If I could jump in. So this lacks some specifics purposefully.
Right.
So what you asked is, could we sort of rally around the concept, which we absolutely did, and I'm delighted that Mr. Pittman and his team have done the same and are going to join hand in hand with us. This is a brainstorm, as you and I talked about, as the team talked about who might very well be involved. We're going to leave it to the chairs to sort of get together to decide, are we hitting all the right folks? Adrian does an amazing job and knows some resources and folks that we simply don't interact with all the time, though we get to participate monthly with as board members. But now it will be up to the chairs to sort of sit down, put some meat on those bones, if you will. So
Wonderful.
It's purposely not rich in lots of detail. This is just sort of a brainstorm of who might be involved. We now have to get to some specifics, then set dates and get invites out and those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you
Yes,
so
ma'am.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ellis. Mrs. Schallheim.
I also wanted to say thank you. Thank you, Dr. Arlotto, for taking this on. Thank you, County Executive Pittman, for your support and enthusiasm. And thank you to all of you for the presentation and for your commitment to this effort. I think this is fabulous. I'm just as delighted as Ms. Ellis is, and I look forward to seeing its good work and just collaboration, information sharing. It's all wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Arlotto.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Schallheim. Ms. Antwine.
Of course, I echo the gratitude. This is tremendous, and I think it is a very positive, collaborative way of taking action on a serious condition throughout our county, state, and nation. I would request that we, in our partnerships, also consider, as a veteran and as an African American, as a minority, that we also reach out, please, for partnering with the NAACP, as well as our military partners that are already partnering with us to be part of this, because I believe that the mental health focus that those organizations may be focusing on could shed light on some other details on to how we can manage this better. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you, and that was our intent. We did not want to present an all-inclusive list. We were very vague, as Dr. Arlotto said, because we don't want to include one group and then miss another group. So again, we will absolutely consider that.
Most certainly, it's a check for myself as well, so that I could keep an eye out on those kinds of things as well. I know that, especially for the military child, that is a very unique life's experience, and having someone that understands that on our team would be very important as we move forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Antoine. Ms. Alvey.
So I think this is a great idea, but I saw that only CRASC was on there as student representation, and because this is such a pressing issue that touches the lives of students every day, if possible to include middle school voices somehow, I think would be helpful, because as a high school student, I know it's easier for us to get out there and take part in things like this, but the middle school voice is also important, and their interpretation of how mental health should be taken in the school system is a little bit different. So just something to consider.
Absolutely, and in addition to CRASC, there was also the newly formed Anne Arundel County Teen Mental Health Advisory, which will be inclusive of teens from all clusters as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Alvey. Mrs. Hummer.
And I have one more suggestion. I want to make sure that someone from the special education community is included, so that we make sure that some of our students who are suffering from mental health issues, and making sure they're addressed and included. So when you're looking at those, I see that many different areas of the school system, that would probably be inclusive, but I just want to make sure and throw that out there as well. But I think it looks great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Corkadell.
I just want to take a minute to express my gratitude. I'm very excited to see Ms. Mickler and Ryan taking on the reins as chair, and I know we're definitely in good hands. I've had the fortune of working with Ms. Mickler in the past, and I know she has strong working relationships. And what I don't think most people see in the background is Ms. Jackson and Ms. Mickler and the county executive and his team already have these core groups that are working interactively. So to culminate that in an exterior capacity, thank you, Ms. Ellis, for bringing that, because I think that that'll definitely go a long way in helping our communities find a way to improve our health, and that it is always inclusive of mental health in particular. And the consequences are of what we face, and the outcomes of those are dire. And we've been suffering as a community for so many years with this. And I think this is another great tool in the toolbox to further reach out for prevention, for care, and also for healing as well. So I look forward to hearing the outcomes of that and the progress reports. And thank you guys once again. I know when these task forces are formed, there's a lot of work involved. So I will just thank you in advance for going above and beyond, because you guys still got to keep the ship sailing on top of this. So thank you once again. And County Executive, if you could please extend gratitude also to the others who are not in attendance, but I know will be diligently working behind the scenes on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Mrs. Schallheim.
Sorry, one more thing. I also want to applaud you all for including the LGBTQ plus community on that list. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I'll just echo my thanks for everyone coming together. And again, I know others have said the true collaborative spirit between the school system and the county government. This doesn't always happen by chance. It happens because people work hard to make it happen. So I appreciate that spirit of collaboration. At this time, I see no further board questions. We'll move to public comment. And we have a couple of individuals who've signed up. Chitra Otter Singh, I hope I said that right, I apologize. Lisa Van Buskirk. And we've got a couple additional seats. If there's anyone else who would like to testify on this particular topic, you're welcome to come forward at this time.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Sowers with the Anne Arundel County Parent Coalition. I just want to say thank you to Dr. Arlotto and thank you to Melissa and everybody that voted for the Mental Health Task Force. And also thank you to Mr. Pittman for helping put it together. I did want to make a recommendation that I think that adding someone from Juvenile Services would be beneficial so that we can see what they think the missing pieces are once a student gets to that point. I think that would be beneficial as well. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Lisa Van Buskirk. We're Start School Leader, Anne Arundel County. I'd like to say this looks really great. I'm enthusiastic about what this could help identify and help resolve in our community. I'd also like to refer you to a 2014 task force put together by this board, the School Start Time Task Force, and specifically I printed out a page from it and I'm going to read it to you. Sleep impacts every aspect of child's mental and physical health. In 2014, Dr. Kyla Wallstrom, the Director of the Applied Research and Education Improvement at the University of Minnesota, conducted a 3-year study across 3 states on the impact of later high school start times on health and academic performance. Specifically, the study found that adolescents getting less than 8 hours of sleep reported higher symptoms of depression. So considering only 21% of our high school students are getting 8 hours of sleep, then I think we have some symptoms of depression. Also in 2014, Sleepless in Fairfax, Virginia was published. Just 1 hour, and the report concludes, just 1 hour less of weekday sleep was associated with significant greater odds of feeling hopeless, seriously considering suicide, suicide attempts, and substance use. Feeling sad or hopelessness increased 38%, suicide consideration increased 21%, suicide attempts increased 58%, tobacco, marijuana, and alcohol use increased 23%, and illicit prescription drug use increased 37%. But more recently, just actually last month at the sleep conference in Texas, there was a published of insufficient sleep and mental health symptoms in collegiate students, and deep down there's not a whole lot of difference between a high school senior and a college freshman. With every additional night of insufficient sleep, the risk of experiencing mental health symptoms increased on average by more than 20%, including an increased risk of 21% for depressed mood, 24% for hopelessness, 24% for anger, 25% for anxiety, 25% for desire to self-harm, and 28% for functional problems, and 28% for suicide ideation. So I hope that as this board moves forward with the transportation consultant later in, and we start addressing the school start times, that at least one piece that we can remove from the mental health task force as something that this board is attempting to address. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the work of this. Thank you.
Ms. Antoine.
Thank you, Ms. Sowers and Ms. Van Buskirk, for your contributions and your recommendations. Ms. Van Buskirk, what you shared with us, if possible, could you email that to our board office so that we could get a copy of that as well, please? Thank you so much.
Okay. Mrs. Schallheim.
I also wanted to say thank you to Ms. Sowers and Ms. Van Buskirk. I was once a sleep-deprived teen who suffered from depression, and so I definitely think that including that as within the groups that are coming together for the task force, I think is a valid data point to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Schallheim. Any further board questions on the Mental Health Task Force or any further public comment on the Mental Health Task Force? Seeing none, we'll now move to our next item. Thank you, everyone, for being here for this. And again, Mr. Pittman, thank you for being here. Mr. Schallheim, did you? Oh, okay, sorry. And just in full transparency, we're going to move to this next item, which is election of officers. And then based on the outcome of the 2 elections, the board's going to have about a 5-minute recess at the conclusion of the election so that we can do some shifting up here at the dais as necessary. At this time, we will move to election of officers as prescribed by law to occur at the board's annual meeting. As we proceed, we will have nominations and then votes, first for president and then for vice president, and both votes require an affirmative vote of at least 5 members pursuant to state law and board policy. If there is only one nomination for an office, we will still have discussion and then call a roll call vote for the yeas and nays. If there are multiple nominations, we will move all names into nomination and then we'll have open discussion before calling the roll. With multiple nominations, the board members will vote by roll call by designating their name of choice. If one of the nominees receives at least 5 votes, that person will be elected. And if no nominee receives at least 5 votes, the chair will entertain further motions. At this point, are there any nominations for president? Mrs. Ellis.
I nominate Mr. Terry Gilliland for president.
We're gonna say-
Yes.
Second.
Second.
Thank you for that. Any discussion on president or any further nominations for president?
I'm sorry, I still want to discuss.
You want to discuss? Okay. Please.
I messed it up.
Sorry.
I,
Mrs. Ellis, yeah.
I do think it's appropriate, even if there is only one candidate, that we share with the public why we feel this is the right choice. So, Mr. Gilliland, for me personally, you have been a model of a leader for this board. You have been extremely supportive of the ongoing transition to an elected board. You have helped sort of bring us all together, and we sorry, I'm a little bit at a loss for words right now. I consider you a uniter, and that's why I feel that you are the right person for that seat. Me personally, I aspire to be as eloquent as you when I go and speak in public venues. So you have represented us very well in that regard too. So anyway, I just want to thank you for your service, and I'm glad to see you continue.
Thank you, Mrs. Ellis. Mrs. Schallheim, and sorry for the...
No worries. I want to second that sentiment. You have been a leader among equals and always willing to discuss, always willing to share your opinion, and you really bring all of us together. You include everyone, and it's I couldn't think of a better person. So thank you for everything you've done to this point, and for the work to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Schallheim. Ms. Antoine.
So, beyond the board, Terry, you have the respect and the know-how that it takes to manage a system as unique and powerful as our county school system. Since taking it on, and you guys can go watch the tapes, Terry was kind of he took on something that was kind of rough going on, and you took the bull by the horns without complaints, and you made sure that a hybrid board like ours was fully representing the best interest of our students, and certainly the established excellence of our school system. I have seen you in the community, and I have seen you within amongst the staff at schools and otherwise, and we would be remiss if we made any changes to a known good. So thank you for your support in that, Terry.
Thank you, Ms. Antoine. Any further discussion? I'll just say, if I could be granted a moment of personal privilege, thank you for the comments and for the continued confidence. You know, I've always said I love consensus, and I love trying to achieve compromise, even when that means everyone doesn't get what what they want, but we understand that we've got to find that happy middle at times. And I think that was evident even at our last meeting with such a complex topic that this board spent months addressing with our prior Vice President, Mr. Rea. I think some of you watch me a little too closely, counting my Diet Mountain Dew consumption and some other things, but I do appreciate the fact that we've been able to achieve a lot, whether out here or a little more quietly in the caucus room when we have some difficult conversations at times. And again, my MO is all about understanding and appreciating the fact that this is a diverse board, and this is a board that has diverse viewpoints as well, and sometimes opposing viewpoints, and it's important that everyone have their voice heard, and that's my continued goal. So again, thank you, everyone. Seeing no further questions or comments, we'll now move for a vote on President Mrs. Howe for the first time. Mrs. Howe, would you please call the roll?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Mrs. Howe, and thank you to the board. We'll now move to nominations for Vice President. Mrs. Schalheim.
I would like to nominate Ms. Ellis.
Okay. Mrs. Schalheim has nominated Ms. Ellis, and then again, pursuant to Robert's rules, nominations do not need a second, so the nomination for Mrs. Ellis has been entered. Mr. Grannon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make actually two nominations of fellow board members. The first, going in alphabetical order, is Candace Antwine. I'm pleased to make that nomination. Candace has brought, in my view, perhaps the most sort of exceptional and singular perspective of any board member to the board. And even times when I disagree with her, I'm always impressed by the insights she brings. She's always thinking about students, and I hope that she'll be considered. The one thing I'll say in particular is that it's kind of inspiring to see how quickly she gets results from her views, and getting things like the bullying report institutionalized and made a regular agenda item. That is precisely the kind of muscular board influence that I want to see from all of us. Frankly, on even things that I don't agree with. It's what we should be doing. So that's my first nomination. And my second nomination is for Michelle Corkadell for Vice President. I've known Ms. Corkadell for like 9 years, but I've really gotten to know her a lot better sitting next to her up on this dais, and learned a lot more about her and how she approaches things. She takes a really long view on behalf of the students in the school system, and sometimes to my frustration, I'll lean over and kind of ask her, which way she's going to vote on something, but she hasn't made up her mind yet because she's still listening to everybody and considering all sides. And I think that's exactly what we want up here. She's got a long record of public service throughout the county in many different positions, most recently as the professional director of constituent services for the county executive's office. And I think she brings that same kind of spirit of dedication, and not just dedication, but knowing how to get things done to this position on the board. And she's already demonstrated that, for example, in her chairmanship of the policy committee. So I think she's worthy of our consideration as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grannon. So that, in full transparency, we've got 3 names now in nomination. We've got Mrs. Ellis, we've got Mrs. Corkadell, and we've got Ms. Antwine. And sorry I didn't do that in alphabetical order, but we have them. Further discussion at this point, Mrs. Schalheim.
Thank you. I also wanted to state how much I respect my 3 colleagues who put their name in the hat or had their name nominated on their behalf. We all have been working together very well the last many months. We all have to work together after this. I respect all of them, and I know that each of them would treat this the VP seat with integrity and build consensus, and again, lead among equals. All of those things are important to me personally. And I also wanted to state, because I don't think it'll go unnoticed, that 3 of the 4 elected people put their name in the hat. I intentionally did not. And I believe in my colleagues at this point. Also, medically, I don't think it would be a wise move. There's medical stuff going on all the time with me, and so I value their leadership, and my day will come.
Thank you, Mrs. Schallheim. Mrs. Ellis.
Thank you, and thank you, Mrs. Schallheim, for your confidence. First of all, I want to take a moment to recognize what a positive sign this is that 3 newer board members are being considered today for vice president. I am honored to be among these ladies, and I believe we each bring important qualities to the table. So wherever we end up today, this board is going to move forward in a very positive way. I want to say a few words about why I accept this nomination, and why I do believe I could be a good option for this position. First, I have a very diverse background that has provided me knowledge and experience in several areas, including education, human resources management, and logistics, as well as a degree in psychology. This knowledge allows me to have a good understanding of various aspects of our school system, which has served me well as I ask questions and make decisions as a board member, and will be a great benefit as I assist our president and can step into that role in his absence. I am a product of AACPS, and now that I have 4 kids of my own, having come through or are coming through the school system, I'm deeply invested in this school system. I'm sorry, I just had to take a moment. Having educated my own kids and prepared them for successful high school careers, I do bring a unique perspective that encourages us as a board to look at through the educational lens a little differently. And as we work with our school system to deliver the best educational experience for our students, I do think that perspective lends well to the board. I have served in leadership roles throughout my life, both professionally and in volunteer work, and I believe I have personal qualities that lend well to an officer position with this board. I do admire the way Mr. Gilliland has served and believe he sets an excellent example as a uniter, and I do intend to serve in the same manner. And finally, I want to say a word about Dr. Arlotto and his team. I came into this seat with big plans and much that I would like to accomplish, and I do believe at times that it may have been perceived by some that I am critical of our administration. While I do tend to have lots of questions in order to make informed decisions, and sometimes I have a different perspective philosophically than Dr. Arlotto or members of his team, I greatly admire the way Dr. Arlotto leads our school system in so many ways, and I will never stop applauding the amazing team Dr. Arlotto has put together. I am particularly overjoyed today. I mean, really, I was giddy from the from that mental health task force presentation. I'm particularly overjoyed that we are working together to address student mental health concerns through the task force that I proposed, and this board agreed is the right thing for our students. I look forward to collaborating with this team on many more ambitious efforts on behalf of our students. I do hope to get the support of this board for the position of vice president, but I know whatever happens, as I said, moving forward, we're going to be in a great place, and I just thank you all for considering me.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ellis. Ms. Santwine.
Thank you, President Gilliland. And Eric, you almost brought me to tears. I didn't know you liked me. Thank you. It is sincerely humbling. Guys, we are an outstanding board. We were challenged from the beginning, basically our very first meeting, to come here and continue the excellence that has been established in our school system. I believe as a board, we have worked towards that. I also strongly believe that we have a lot more work to do. And in doing that work, we have to establish trust relationships. Back in December and again January, February timeframe, I was actually approached about going for VP earlier on. And in much of this, for the same reasons, I had some circumstances that definitely took priority over my full focus as VP at that time. I did relay, though, that once I got my house in order, for lack of a better phrase, that I would be ready to serve in that capacity. And this is why I'm requesting of my fellow board members that you please consider that this is time for action, that I now have the flexibility to dedicate myself to the needs of the school system to support President Gilliland as needed as we move forward, and to support most certainly the 83,000 plus that depend on us every single day. I also want to build better relationships with our staff, with the support and help and recommendations from Dr. Arlotto. I am ready to serve. Wee bit about me, if you guys didn't pick that up in the last almost 7 months, I have spent 20 years of service to the country under the umbrellas of the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security, and in that I've created passionate areas of concern that I dedicate myself to as well. I brought that institutionalized understanding. I'll just speak louder. I brought that institutionalized understanding to this board and to the decision-making process. Through that and through the support of the entire board, Dr. Arlotto and your staff, I've been able to visit almost every school in District 1, to date 20 schools. I have been able to talk to students, to parents, to others that influence the way we move forward, and I have to say this system is incredible. I also am a mom, and a proud mom of a recent graduate from Meade High School, and that was one of the most I will not describe, because I cannot describe what that meant, but it was because of the leadership in place that my son was able to achieve the success that he achieved. So with that, I request of my fellow members that you please consider the fact that I now have the time, the flexibility, and certainly the heart and the dedication to serve in the capacity of VP. And as Ms. Ellis shared, despite the outcomes, my dedication will not change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Antwine. Mrs. Corkadell.
Thank you, Mr. President, for recognizing me, and thank you, Mr. Grannon, for putting forth my name as a nominee for Vice President. It's with humble honor that I accept the nomination for Vice President. I want to take just a quick moment to express my appreciation with brevity. This is a moment of personal honor for me, but also of deep personal responsibility. I do not take the position lightly. I fully understand the responsibilities of the position, and should I be honored by a majority of my fellow members' votes, look forward to interacting with our education community as a leader ready to assist the President in representing AACPS in a professional, meaningful manner that is worthy of the dignity of the position. It is also a moment of reflection and respect. We are all here because of the tireless service of past board members stretching all the way back over 150 years to 1865, when the amended charter established the Board of School Commissioners, which eventually became what we know as the Board of Education around the year 1916. I personally am here today because through the will and grace of God, I have a family that has given me their full support, unconditional love, and constant encouragement. I'm blessed to have had meaningful career, political, and civic opportunities, experiences, stretching the course of over 30 years, and outstanding members and colleagues along the way who have and continue to help me develop into a better leader. and I would be remiss not to honor the confidence and support the residents of District 7 gave me by electing me to represent them on this distinguished board. If my nomination is confirmed by my fellow members, I intend to take the legacy of our trailblazers and unifiers in our board's history and their predecessors upward and forward. You already know my vision for ACPS, the priorities I would like to introduce, my background, and my relevant leadership experience. I have the commitment, passion, and humility to serve my fellow members with honor, ethics, and dignity. I have the determination to achieve the highest possible level of outcomes for all students, and I am confident that collectively we have the power to do so. We just need to be very smart in our planning and priority setting and streetwise in our actions, which we have been thus far to date. Rest assured that I will work tirelessly with my eyes on the goals we agree on together, my ears open to the voices of all, and my heart committed to all students, which is what we're really here about. I know that regardless of today's outcome, each one of us will keep doing what we do best with enthusiasm, integrity, innovation, and continued hope for our students' futures. We have much to do, and all possess the drive to continue making differences in the lives of so many others. Unified, we are even stronger, and I am confident that together we will achieve great things and continue the education legacy that started so humbly for this organization over 150 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Corkadell. Any further board questions or comments at this point? Seeing none, we'll now move to a vote on Vice President. Mrs. Howe, would you please call the roll? And again, this won't be yeas and nays. This will be by designating names of choice.
Miss Ellis?
Miss Ellis.
Ms. Corkadell.
Ms. Corkadell.
Ms. Corkadell.
Ms. Corkadell.
Ms. Antwine.
Ms. Corkadell. Member, having received 5 votes, Mrs. Corkadell has been elected Vice President. At this point, the board will take about a 5-minute recess. Thank you.
Are 5 votes allowed to go to the bathroom? like leather. What are they called? What is it? Oh, all bird. Got it.
Stand up.
We give you a 30-second warning.
Mr. Burns and I are discussing shoes. It's very important.
We'll now reconvene and resume with public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on an item not on today's agenda may offer testimony during this public comment portion of the meeting. Speakers are allotted 3 minutes each and may not allocate their time to others. A tone will sound when time has expired. The board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be watching or viewing this meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. It is not the board's general practice to engage in question and answer sessions with speakers. For the record, please give your name before speaking. Handouts should be given to the board assistant. And I would be remiss if I know we were introducing some people earlier, and we announced at the last meeting that Diane Howe would be the new board assistant replacing Molly Connolly as she trots off into her retirement, well deserved. But I also would like to introduce Diane's assistant who's at the table with her, and it's Jackie Money. So welcome. At this time, we'll move forward with those who have signed up in advance. Jody Donnie, or Donnie, if I pronounced that right, I hope I did, and Kathy Flaherty. If either of them are here. Yeah, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Gilliard, Dr. Arlato, and members of the board. My name is Kathy Flaherty, and I have 2 children in our high school school system. I was pleased to see my friend and fellow parent, Jeannie Salm, chair of CCAC, give the year-end CCAC report last meeting. I was even more pleased to hear the mention and short discussion of choice exceptional students. I appreciate Ms. Ann Trine's curiosity and honesty last meeting when she was unfamiliar with the term and asked about it. I'd urge the rest of you, if you don't know of these challenges, to spend just a little bit of time learning about it. An older term, not used so much more, is GTLD, Gifted Learning Disabled. Nationally, it's estimated that choice exceptional students comprise only about 6% of students with a learning disability. So we're talking about 6% of 10% of the student population, or 0.6% of our AACPS population. Maybe 500 of our over 80,000 all means all students. I get it, it's a small number. However, with all percentages, if it's you, it's 100% of your reality. Also, 2E students can eat up a much higher percentage of school resources if the educational programming is not appropriate for their individual needs. I understand it's a complicated, unique personal learning issue. I also understand the challenges choice exceptionality may and does present for students, parents, and teachers as a 2E student attempts to navigate a public school system. In our society, with increased levels of autism and Asperger's, some people confuse 2E and Asperger's syndrome. Most students with Asperger's are 2E. However, not all 2E students have Asperger's, often allowing these students to fly under the radar, many times struggling without appropriate support for their entire school career. One of the challenges for these students is that often they don't qualify for special education under IDEA. They may appear to be a good student and achieve good grades, but often be considered as simply lazy, not motivated, or just doesn't care. Advanced learning opportunities that they need may be elusive for them. They may be able to keep up aptitude-wise, but not able to keep up organizationally or other ways such as distractibility in a class. Often there's defined disabilities that are hidden. Processing speed deficits are very common for 2E students. A student may have a mental level IQ, but not be able to access that knowledge stored in his brain at the same speed as age-level peers. It can be frustrating for the student and baffling for staff who work with them. I know there are many people here at Central Office who are aware and interested in 2E students, because I've had many conversations with many of them over the years. I remain concerned that the teachers on the ground don't really understand the issue when a 2E student is in their charge. Such a student may repeat the same pattern over and over, with teachers continually frustrated with his learning pattern and style, only to have teachers and staff realize at the end of the year what has been known for years, simply to repeat it the next year or at the next level. How would we expect such a kid to remain engaged and successful in his education? Unfortunately, I don't know the answers. I think awareness of the gravity of life for a 2E student and their family is a beginning, and increased focus and training for the staff at the school level. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Ms. Antwine.
Thank you for that presentation. Last meeting, it was extremely informative, as you shared. When the definition and explanation was shared with me, it made a lot more sense to me because I am related to children who would be considered 2E. I did have a question for Dr. Arlotto. Are similar to when teachers are trained in their development to look for indicators of maybe abuse or other indicators that they are legally obligated to look for in the classroom? Are there indicators that teachers generally look for when it comes to students that are considered twice exceptional or could be considered twice exceptional?
So the short answer is it's not my expertise, so I'm not really sure. The longer answer would be either it would be there's not a checklist that I'm aware of, to use that term, where a teacher would check off certain boxes to say this is what I'm looking for in twice exceptional. It is really characteristics that the student displays, not just at school, but at home and on the playground. And so as their time with us is 6.5 hours a day, plus what the parent shares, there are characteristics that when you put those together, you then say, we have a twice exceptional student. So I don't believe that there is a checklist per se. But again, let me go back to where I began. It's not my expertise. I'd have to stand with staff that do specific training for our students that I could rely on.
And the only reason I asked, in your testimony, you shared that there may be often there may be some indicators that may be overlooked or misunderstood by teachers on the ground. So if Dr. Arlotto, thank you for going back to check that, but if we find that this may be something we want to start introducing in our development, I don't remember per se if that was introduced in the presentation, but I think it would be a good idea if we're not already supporting that we consider that in our development of our teachers.
Mr. Grannon.
Yeah, just briefly, this isn't fully dispositive of the question that Ms. Antwine raised, nor of the very valid concerns that were just expressed by a member of the public at the podium there. But I know somewhat from personal experience that at least for a certain subset of students, there's a completely independent determination made, for example, if they have a disability, a learning disability, that is best dealt with through an IEP, and then entirely separate consideration as to whether, for example, they meet the requirements for the gifted and talented program. So there are students that are getting IEPs because they have learning disabilities of one kind or another, but are in the gifted and talented program because they're performing at a level that warrants that. Again, that doesn't fully address the concerns. I do think we should look more at this, and then this is one of those things where sometimes I think it's our responsibility in terms of communicating effectively with the public to kind of use the nomenclature that's being used in these discussions. And I did raise to the board in the past the idea that other counties are using this label of twice exceptional, and that while we are providing services that are meeting the needs of many students who qualify as twice exceptional, we're not using the nomenclature as prominently as, for example, is used in Montgomery County. So just in terms of making known to the public what is already in place and what is effectively being sort of done for students that qualify, that's just something that we might consider.
Thank you, Mr. Grannon. One more time, Jody, Donnie. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll now move to our departmental reports. And just to be very transparent, there are usually four departmental reports. The two that are missing have been interwoven into specific agenda items, that one of which we'll get to momentarily, which is the transportation consultant. So as we get to those items, certainly we'll be flexible if we somewhat deviate from the specific agenda item there to cover a broader question that may be in those topics. We can certainly do that at that time if that's okay with the board. But at this time, we'll move to item 5.01, which is the Safety and Security Report. Mrs. Jackson, welcome.
Good morning, President Gilland, Vice President Corkadell, members of the Board of Education, and Dr. Arlotto. For the record, I am Monique Jackson, Deputy Superintendent for Student and School Support. I am providing a monthly update on security as requested. In June, Mr. Batten and Ms. Powell completed the state-mandated 40-hour SRO training course with the Anne Arundel County Police Department SROs under the direction of the Maryland Center for School Safety. Mr. Batten provided security-related training to all assistant principals in the annual Assistant Principal Professional Development in June. The Office of School Security is reviewing next steps in relationship to the grant-funded school security assessments. In addition, the Office of School Security has provided 6 two-hour training sessions to school secretaries and front office staff. Thank you. This concludes the update, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. We'll turn to board questions and comments. Ms. Antoine.
Ms. Jackson, thank you very much for that presentation. I'm noticing a lot of construction for our vestibules specifically and upgrades for security measures. So I thank you and your entire all of your safety and security departments for the aggressive actions that you're taking there. I wanted to understand, and this is certainly a yes or no because we cannot discuss what we do in terms of safety and security.
Thank you.
But with the constructions going on with the vestibules and other items physically happening, are we mitigating or putting in place mitigations for safety and security while those things are going on?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am. And I wanted to add to your original comment that I speak a lot when I'm speaking to addressing the board about partnerships, and it's not just it's not just school security, but it's a true partnership with Mr. Shaknovich and his office as well.
Okay, good. That's
so
good
thank
to
you
know.
very much to the entire team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions on safety and security from the board? Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, thank you, Mrs. Jackson. Are you doing round two?
Thank you.
5.02, diversity and inclusion.
Good morning again, President Gilland, Vice President Corkadell, members of the Board of Education, and Dr. Arlotto. Again, for the record, I'm Monique Jackson, Deputy Superintendent. This morning, I'm speaking on behalf of Dr. Maisha Gillands, Executive Director of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement. I am providing the monthly update on diversity and inclusion as requested. The Office of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement continues to be intentional in their efforts in assisting schools in eliminating the achievement gap. For your consideration, I present to you 2 highlights of the work of the office over the past month. First, as several of you have mentioned, we are very proud of the Unlocking Our Potential, Growing Ourselves to Grow Others Leadership Conference that was held on June 27th. Over 800 attendees, including board members, school-based administrators, teachers, support staff, and central office personnel assembled at Northeast High School for the conference. The partnership between Professional Growth and Development and the Office of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement and planning for that event has been incredible. The conference's opening was truly student-centered. A children's rock band kicked off the conference, and they were amazing. Dr. Arlotto gave greetings and spoke about the tenets of our strategic plan, with a special emphasis on all means all and the importance of self-care so that we can be our best selves, so that we can support our students. Students across the district were featured along with a diverse group of AACPS staff singing a very powerful song entitled, "Don't Give Up on Me." The song emphasized the importance of every child having a caring adult in their lives. 2 amazing student leaders, one from Arundel High School and the other from North County High School, spoke about just that, the impact of a caring adult in their lives. Participants then engaged in 3 professional development sessions that were broken down into 3 strands: All Means All, Ready, Set, Launch, and Sound Stewardship, which all align with our current strategic plan. These sessions were facilitated by a wide variety of individuals, including Todd Nasolny, author of Kids Deserve It, AACPS administrators, teacher leaders, and other administrative staff. Based on the feedback that was provided to us, participants left feeling inspired, motivated, energized, and better informed on how to meet the needs of our diverse student population. Secondly, for the second year, the Office of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement has provided Anne Arundel County Public School staff with a summer resource guide for building equity, which includes but is not limited to a summary of the takeaways from the early dismissal professional development modules, potential interview questions that promote the hiring of equity-minded staff, summer equity professional development opportunities, recommended summer reads that promote equity, diversity, and inclusion, and information on selecting the right equity leads and creating an effective equity team. Thank you, and this concludes the update, and I am open to answering any questions that you may have.
Thank you again, Mrs. Jackson, and because you referenced the conference, and I know she's here today, I just want to say a big thank you to Mary Jo Childs for that song. You have a beautiful voice. Miss Antwine.
So I thank you all for the work that you did. I know since December it has been some real heavy lifting on your part to make change, especially in the area of diversity and inclusion, an area that is fragile and quite unique. You all have, I believe, there's a very good idea of how to move forward. In I believe it was March that I requested of you all a 5-year reporting, a 5-year chart that identifies the reports we've received on hate incidents. And although I requested a lot of details, you guys shared some high levels with me, and I appreciate that. It was so high level that I'm requesting that we talk about it a bit now. On that chart, there were still some major concerns to include a percentage delta between the last 5 years increasing in reporting. So, Diane, if you can pull the chart up. Oh, okay. So we're having technical difficulties. So on the chart, though, there is in some cases there was almost 100% more reports being made in some areas and categories, specifically in race and gender bias. I wanted to understand from your perspective what the variables may have been that if those reports drastically increased, rather than I'm thinking with all the work we're doing, they should decrease.
Absolutely, and I had this discussion with a couple of your colleagues just several days ago. I believe that our school system, as has been mentioned several times, with the increased professional development for our staff, and when I say staff, I don't mean just teaching staff, but our custodians, our bus drivers, things of that nature, as well as the increased focus with our student population. I believe that the reporting is going up, and that's what we want them to do. We want our students to report, because we only know and can work with and can mitigate that which we know. And so I believe, it's my belief, that because we have such a focused emphasis on advisory, professional development, all of those things, that we are beginning to turn the tide, that everyone understands it is not okay not to feel welcomed and accepted in this school system. And because of that, we will continue to ask people to report. And it is my belief that for maybe the next year or so, we may have an increase in the number of reports. And as we continue to have an increase in the number of reports, we're able to focus on the work. And by that I mean, for example, I've been asked several times, where do we see our area of focus? And I've said several times, middle schools. But without that reporting data and that increase in reporting, I wouldn't know that. And so I'm encouraging everyone publicly to continue to report. Reporting is a helpful tool to the entire school system, and it gives us valuable data to help us guide the work of not just Dr. Gillen's office, but the entire school system.
Thank you for that, Ms. Jackson. I figured it had a positive twist to it, but there is still that element that it may not be that positive twist. And the reason I requested the details that I requested was so that we as decision makers on the board can go back and look at those deltas and those considerations. Would you be able, and I guess I need to motion this, but would you all be able to share with us some of the things that do influence that outcome, so that we can know for sure that it's a positive reporting situation rather than the other side of it where it may be something that we have to consider in terms of management?
And I would say to you, my hypothesis that I just shared with you is probably the best hypothesis that I could give you, because I don't know, I can't specifically say what the increase is due to. I would say that we're going to continue to monitor it over the years and provide support for our students. I've also, again, that's anecdotal data based upon my experience in the school system. I was a teacher, classroom teacher. I was a assistant principal, all the way through central office. And I'm basing what I'm telling you based upon my experience, that we have, over the last 4 to 5 years, really had a focused effort on bullying, bias-motivated behavior, changes to our Code of Student Conduct to make sure that all students, really all means all students feel safe and secure when they are coming to school. I don't know how to give you a more in-depth answer other than we'll continue to monitor, and as we see trends, we will in our reports continue to report the trends such as middle schools and continue to talk about what we are doing to combat those trends, such as advisory in middle school, guest speakers, looking at assemblies, some of the work that we're doing in the communities, involving our NAACP and working with members of our NAACP and other community organizations to really do a community grassroots effort.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any further board questions or comments at this point? Seeing none, any public comment on diversity and inclusion? Yes, ma'am.
Hello again. Jennifer Sowers, Anne Arundel County Parent Coalition. I had sent you guys a summary of some of the emergency calls and communications from the schools across the county. And, you know, that data has not been disseminated and analyzed. But since then, I met with the Director for Juvenile and Victim Assistance, and she works with Juvenile Services, and she does have that data available for you guys that is specific to what has occurred on school property. So that would include the biased behavior, assaults, sexual assaults, everything. So she has agreed to put that together. And so I would recommend, in terms of what we were just talking about, asking her for several years and see if there is a trend that we could maybe identify and actually identify some areas and some schools that might need some additional supports. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sowers. Ms. Antoine.
Thank you for that, Ms. Sowers. Actually, just to let you know, the request that I made back in March, I want to say it was March, was based on a lot of the work that you have done and the information that you shared with us and others in the community that brought these things to my attention, which is why my request to you guys was so detailed, and very important that those details be relayed so that we amongst on the board can make decisions on how to work with Dr. Arlotto and you all to make changes where they need to be made. I would still request that you all take the time to give me the info that I requested, because it will tell a different type of story. I'm positive, as you are, that story is because we are promulgating information that's necessary, that positive change is coming, but without key details, it's hard to tell that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Antoine. Any further comments from the board or from the public on diversity and inclusion? Seeing none, we'll now move to our consent calendar. And before I ask for a motion to bundle, just to clarify what I'd like to do, just to clear the business more efficiently, I'd like to ask for a motion to bundle 6.1 through 6.6, but remove 6.14 and hear that separately, because I think that conversation is going to be a bit more extended. So that's the rationale behind that. So is there a motion to bundle 6.01 to 6.16 exclusive of 6.14?
Second.
Second, okay. Discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll just go with the yeas and nays. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Okay, we'll now ask for a consideration of 6.01 to 6.16 exclusive of 6.14 as action items. Dr. Arlotto, can we have your recommendation, please?
Yes, sir. I recommend board approval of the contracts as listed on today's agenda, 6.01 through 6.16, excluding 6.14 as you have described.
Motion
So moved.
and a second.
Second.
Great. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. We'll now move to board questions and comments. Mrs. Schalheim.
Thank you. Yes. I have a question about 6.06 through 6.09. And just I hope that it's a simple question. This all relates to construction of vestibules, but they're all to different companies. Is that because one individual company doesn't have the capacity to do all of that work? That was my assumption.
Chef Newbridge, Chief Operating Officer, and essentially that is correct. We pre-qualify architects, so on a competency quality assurance basis, they're all of the same capacity, but it's really a volume issue. We now that the funding's been secured by both the county government and a state grant that we received, there's a timeliness issue. We need to complete the work before the expiration date of the grant, so to make that as efficient and timely as possible, we split the work amongst a few firms so we could sort of push the work at an accelerated pace.
Perfect. That was my assumption. Thank you so much for
Yes,
that. I also have a question about 6.15, I think. Sorry, getting myself together here. Oh, yes. And this is probably just a accounting question, but can you explain the deduction, the alternate number 1 deduction on the back side of the yellow page? I guess I just don't know what that means. It was for the award-winning contract and also for the other body that didn't receive the contract, and I guess I just want to know what the alternate number 1 means.
Sure. There's essentially 2 ways to provide a reflective surface on the roof. One way is to put a modified bitumen cap sheet, which is a sort of an extra thick asphaltic paper with white stone granule chips that are basically embedded in it. That's one technology. The second technology is to use a white stone aggregate. We typically use a Texas number 7 white chip here. It's very reflective of the sun, and the modified cap sheet version typically is a little bit more costly. But again, they provide the same durability. They provide protection to the roof, not just from sun damage, UV degradation, but also from workers walking on a roof or putting down their toolboxes. So it's really 2 ways to skin the same cat, essentially, and we're choosing the more cost-effective of the 2.
Wonderful. Thank you for that explanation. One further question about item 6.16. It just piqued my interest. Does this have to, or let me rephrase, will this include any sort of EPA involvement or cleanup of any sort?
So the answer to that is yes, at the margins. Here in the state of Maryland, we work with the Maryland State Department of the Environment and the Coast Guard on matters such as this. Essentially, the feds delegate the authority to the state of Maryland because they deem that the state is competent in this area to serve in their stead.
Okay.
So the jurisdiction, as long as, again, the feds maintain that level of confidence, will be interacting with the state Department of the Environment and the Coast Guard.
So, although the contract is awarded to the company listed, is the budgeted amount, the amount of the contract to, is that essentially getting written to the contractor, but then rewritten to for the environmental cleanup port? I mean, is this the fee for the environmental cleanup?
Yes, this is the cost to remediate the oil contamination.
Okay.
There's a plan. So the process, Ms. Schallheim, just for the board's quick edification, is essentially in collaboration with the regulatory officials. You have to put together a written plan. It's really a multi-agency approach. Once that plan has been vetted and approved, then you go and you price that plan. So the plan is to execute the remediation efforts that have essentially been blessed by the regulators. You don't want to sort of go down one path and then it's not the way that all parties have agreed to. So the plan's been vetted, and then the price then matches that vetted plan. That's the process here.
Okay. Oh, and it wasn't, it is an emergency thing, but we also have the funding to accommodate,
Yes,
the funds to accommodate. Okay. Thank you so much. Always lots of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Schallheim. Ms. Antwine.
Hello. I wanted to commend you and your team. Once I went through this, I noticed there were areas of cost savings when there were renewals of contracts, even up to 20%, which is above the norm, the standards of 10 to 15%. So that I really commend you all for doing that. A lot of your work includes looking for efficiencies on how we can save money and how we can best support our system in doing that. So thank you for that. I also have one question. When we do operating and capital funds, a hybrid to cover the costs, is it a clear-cut situation where only only this type of money can go here, only this type of money can go there? And if so, in terms of operating funds, do all of those funds come out of facilities, or does it come from different areas throughout the system?
Sure. So you asked 2 questions, so let me give you 2 different examples. Sure, that's okay. So say we have to buy science balance beams, okay, and we are currently constructing the brand new Crofton Area High School. We will be using capital dollars to buy the initial set of science balance beams as part of the outfitting process for that school. Those will be funded by capital dollars. But should Southern High School or North County High School break, lose, damage, or just need 3 more because of enrollment growth, they would be using operating dollars. So we take a look at, there are rules governing the type of procurement activity and the funding thereof, and we're very careful to adhere to those. I will say in general, the rules around capital funding are much more intensive and deliberate, so we are very careful whenever we're using capital dollars or grant dollars to make sure that we're comporting with the IRS regulations, et cetera. So, I mean, those are discrete and they're applications, based. In terms of then the acquisitions again can go sort of across the departments. Some acquisitions can be made at the school level. Some can be made here at the central office, for example, by like a science department of the school district. And some of them are made by, for example, our facilities team when we're outfitting schools, et cetera. So, but our finance and accounting division really is that central control point and checks to make sure that irrespective of who the originator is of a request, that the financing mechanism aligns properly, and then they work with the purchasing unit to make sure that that procurement document is properly aligned.
Okay, thank you. So when you give us the total dollar amount, it is quite possible that only about $10 will be coming out of operating funds and the rest of the capital funds, and otherwise there's no this amount comes out of capital funding. This specific amount for this type of work always has to be covered under operation.
Correct.
Okay.
Essentially, they're best estimates based on prior procurement activity levels.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Antoine. Any further questions on the consent calendar, again, with the exception of 6.14? Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll now move to a vote on the consent items. Mrs. Howe, would you please call the roll at this time?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Just throwing up, she's going in the old order. Thank you so much. We'll now move to item 6.14, which is the student transportation consultant. And again, just separating that because I know we've got some public comment, and I expect some board questions and comments specific to this. We'll start with Mrs. Ellis.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just looking for the page. So can you walk us through the process a little bit of how we got to this one vendor, and do you feel that you had a large enough pool to select from? Because I only see.
Sure. If you can take a look, again for the record, Alex Shackno, Chief Operating Officer. So the solicitation was actually sent out to 471 entities, obviously across multiple interest spectrums. On a project like this, it's potential that you can have a lead with subcontractors, et cetera. So to sort of canvass the marketplace, we sent out notifications to as far and wide as we possibly could. That's our initiation going out. In addition to that, we obviously are required to advertise it in certain locations, post it on the state of Maryland, soon to formally be called eMaryland Marketplace. They're coming up with a new gimmick for it. But so we use a multi-channel approach to broadcast the solicitation. Ultimately, we did have a number of vendors that expressed sufficient interest in it that they did come in, and we hold what's called a pre-bid meeting. And it's essentially an opportunity for us at a very high level to go over the specifications and the project, the scope, et cetera, and then allow the vendors an opportunity to ask any questions that they may have of us, clarifying type of questions. And of course, any of those Q&A type of exchanges are always documented in writing and then redistributed back out. So it's not just a formal exchange of information. It's cataloged in a written format. So there's no disagreement later on in terms of what was said and what wasn't said. I would say the limiting factors really on this solicitation are twofold, and I'll just sort of generally categorize those. One, quite honestly, we're a big, complex school district, and this is a complex topic. So it's maybe a little bit of a reach for some firms that either this isn't their core competency, or just the scale of our school district versus maybe Kent County. It's a different sort of thing. The second piece, and probably more importantly so, is that there is a ethics and conflicts of interest provision in any solicitation like this, and it's very important that that exists, and very important that we adhere to it and the project offerers adhere to it. And specifically, on any project such as this, you want to avoid a potential that a vendor or a contractor, an offerer, etc., would put forward a list of recommendations that could potentially benefit them, or could be structured in a way that at some point in time they would be the only ones that could bid on it, etc. So there are provisions in the contract that says that that not only the prime company but any of the subcontractors would be precluded from either having active engagements with the school district, or being able to essentially bid or participate either as a prime or as a sub on any work here in the school district for a period of 5 years. So that is a consideration that a company has to make, but again, it's a very purposeful, very deliberate endeavor. So there were a few firms that notified us and said, in light of the conflict of interest, essentially non-compete provisions, that they would withdraw further consideration.
Okay. So I see just a few numbers here, but can you give me, after this overall process that you've been through, your feeling about this vendor's capability to achieve the goals that we had put forth in this consultation? Sure.
Well, quite honestly, we wouldn't be sitting here before you asking for your approvals if we weren't confident. If this firm was not, in our estimation, capable of delivering, we would have resolicited potentially. So that is not the case here. Not only did their proposal address all of the required elements that we were seeking information on, they provided us an extensive list of references. We reached out to those references, school districts that are comparable in size, or if not, at least certainly in complexity. I believe Greenwich, Calvert County, Chesapeake County, Virginia. There's a number of school districts that this firm has done similar type of work or activities for. So we obviously not just take the word of the company because they're going to say, hey, we did great. Sure. No, we actually call my counterpart or transportation head or business management services head, et cetera, of those jurisdictions. We also ask them to give us excerpts or links to deliverables that they've provided to other clients, so we're able to take a look at the type of product that they are capable of generating. And this firm is not self-performing in its entirety. They do have 2 subcontractors that are working with them, and we also do reference checks and check the capacity, the credibility, the reliability of their subcontractors as well.
Thank you. And just to clarify why I asked that question, I certainly would never question that you would put something forward as a recommendation that you didn't believe in, but I was asking the question because we only see one company here, and you mentioned the limitations or the challenges for finding someone for this work. I just wanted to hear from you that despite all of that, you do feel like we have identified someone who can meet our goals.
I do, and I'll tell you, this firm has, the report that we're asking for is a sort of it's broad in terms of transportation, but it's just focused on transportation. Right. I will just offer that this company is a multidiscipline firm and has done a variety of educational related activities for other school districts. So in addition to obviously understanding transportation, because that's the focus of the study and that's the only yardstick we applied to them, they actually have performed work, everything from policy review to organizational structures of boards and school districts and other types. So they understand the business of schools and then obviously the business of transportation. And I think that's in a way beneficial to this work product because there's a high degree of technical nature just in transportation, but maybe doing transportation for a school district or a sizable school district is maybe different than transporting oranges or orange juice from Florida to here. That's transportation as well. So we were sort of heartened by the fact that we feel that they understand the business of schools, they understand the business of public K-12 education, and the business of transportation.
And we're not creating something new here. This type of work has been done, so this isn't, in other words, it's not unique.
Well, so the answer to that is yes. I would say our ask is a little bit more comprehensive. This board wanted something. A lot of times the work is more narrowly tailored or niche focused to address a specific problem. It's our understanding as staff and as the superintendent that this board wanted a very broad-based sort of an overarching, multifaceted, and that's why, if you recall the scope was pretty extensive. And no one part is any less or any more important than the others. We expect them to deliver on all of those points, and I think that would put us as an entity and you as a governing body in a better place.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mrs. Ellis. Ms. Antoine.
So my question was, I noticed here the term date, once approved or if approved, they start tomorrow. So I wanted to know, are they only working with the transportation department, or will they be able to work with different departments as they do this review and
Sure. So if they only work with transportation, this would be a miserable failure. The solicitation actually requires them to work with other departments and entities, everything from schools, who are our customers, to parents, but also special education, athletics, Office of School Performance, et cetera. So budget, finance.
Right.
So they have to work with all of the aspects that touch or are touched by transportation. Otherwise, they would not be able to gain a 360 understanding of the myriad of issues that are associated with transporting 63+ thousand youngsters. So.
Wonderful. So then my follow-on question would be, are there a set of touch points, people that they, as the consultants, can reach out to when, from those specific areas when needed and as needed, since their term is not necessarily, they really have a lot to do in a short period of time.
So yes, and so once prospectively, should the board approve this contract today, then there's obviously a document exchange. We have to actually formally enter into a contract and exchange all that legal paperwork. But soon thereafter, we'll have a kickoff, essentially a kickoff meeting. It's much more than just to get to know each other. It's really to develop a schedule, develop contact points, develop a list of information. We're gonna have to do a lot of data dumps on them. So we're gonna have to understand, what their data requests are, what format. So there's a very large pre-planning element to this.
Right.
And I say it's a kickoff meeting. It's just not a one-time event. So if you do not get the kickoff, it's almost like designing a building. If you don't design it right, heaven help you trying to construct it and have it last for 50 years.
Right.
So we want to purposely go a little intentionally slow at that initiation phase to make sure that we understand the project, that we have the right resources available, that they have the contact information for the right, touch point folks, et cetera. And then from there, it's not sort of like a linear project. From there, it's going to branch out Because again, it's not going to be a one-man team. They do have a team of individuals with different subject matter expertise, so they will branch out then and begin working more discreetly. So here at the central office, we're going to be operating a little bit like air traffic control does at BWI. I mean, we're going to be managing the process, but they're going to be out working with those different entities and those different business units, gathering the information that they need to fill in the blanks in their report that ultimately is all going to get rolled back up together again.
And then my last question would be concerning an extension. Should they get to, say, December and they foresee they're unable to accomplish what they felt like they could for whatever the reason, have we in our contract considered extending their term if necessary?
So we've not considered that. We were very explicit that we
want it done by then.
We want it done on a specific timeline.
Sure.
But almost every in any contract can be modified or extended.
Sure.
I mean, the legal mechanisms do exist in almost all cases, and if that was so, it would be by mutual concurrence, essentially.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Antwine. Mrs. Shawhine.
I just once again wanted to say thank you for this. I know that this is something that a lot of us have desired for some time, and this is a wonderful moment. I just had one very small question, just because I remember the scope and I don't remember all the milestones within that need to be accomplished within the work period. Is there any opportunity for, they're going to be reporting to you, I would imagine, on milestones that they've reached according to the contract that you all enter into. When they do hit those milestones and do report to you, do we get to hear any of that, or is there any sort of board feedback loop with that at all?
No, typically not, because again, the work product starts narrow and then goes wide, and it's got to, because of function and time. So it goes wide, and there's a lot of activities all happening at the same time, and then it's sort of brought back together in terms of the final product. So we're going to be watching those discrete elements to make sure that they hit the timeline. There's about 11 phases to this project, and we're going to be holding progress meetings with them. And the timelines are two-directional, remember.
Right.
I mean, obviously, they have to hit their timelines, but they're relying upon us hitting our timelines, too. So we're going to have to deliver information timely or in the right format, or give them access to the right individuals or functions here within the school district. So it's more of a collaborative effort to make sure that we hit those timelines.
Wonderful. So I guess the reason for my question is, and I know that the term is intentional to, I believe, to align to our budget cycle and our final budgetary decisions.
That was the request that the board had made of us. So.
And so I assume that we would have their, say, like bell schedules or anything that they would produce as a recommendation or scenario would be given to us. It looks like with enough time for us to then add to if we needed to, or amend the budget that allows for that timing.
Correct. It's our understanding that the board wanted it after the delivery of the superintendent's budget, and basically coterminous when you're going to be holding your workshops and your hearings. So you're going to have ample time with it in your hands to arrive at any amendments or anything you wish to do during the latter part of January and into February.
Very exciting. Thank you so much.
Yes,
ma'am. Thank you. Mrs. Ellis.
And yeah, one more question after those questions that came to mind. So based on the milestones, are there opportunities for you to receive information and perhaps identify an area where you might build, the superintendent might build into his budget. In other words, the final won't come till January. But if information comes out of this consultation that, oh, we need to be doing this, do you foresee that as a potential?
So yes, ma'am. The answer to that is certainly yes. It's possible, maybe even plausible. I will say that the superintendent has to deliver his budget to you in the first Wednesday of the December.
Right.
In order to arrive at that, we've kind of put the budget in the can a little bit ahead of that schedule. So I'm not sure how many of those actionable things will be fully flushed out with fiscal notes and whatever else might be required by the time we have to put the wrap on the superintendent's version of the report. So to the extent that we're aware of things and can wrap our arms around them and price them accordingly, et cetera, that's something that the superintendent can certainly consider at his level. And if not, then the board is at their liberty to do as you and your colleagues please afterwards.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Ellis. Seeing no further board questions at this time, we could do any summary comments momentarily. I'd like to defer to public comment if that's okay. And we have one card initially, and that's Lisa Van Buskirk. And if there's anybody else who would like to speak on the student transportation consultant, please feel free to come forward now.
Hello again, Lisa Van Buskirk, Steuart School Leader, Anne Arundel County. When I saw the meeting stuff posted on the website with the name, I started Googling them, and I was pleasantly surprised because I don't know all the transportation consultants that are out there. But when I was looking at some of the reports for Calvert County, for instance, that they did in 2017, and then some of the smaller districts they did where they did very comprehensive reviews but included elements of transportation. It looked like they can offer you some solid recommendations and recommendations for things AACPS does well and things that can be improved upon. And taken together with the 2007, 2014, and the upcoming 2020 or so Office of Legislative Audit recommendations, I think that will really be able to move AACPS's transportation to be the best in the state. Particularly from the Calvert County's recommendations, some things that stood out for me that I'm hopeful they'll be able to address for AACPS is a recommendation to Calvert County to use GPS tracking software, comparing route expenditures versus actual time and mileage data, optimizing bus route assignments, monitoring non-performance of bus routes, developing an optimized set of regular routes with the existing bell times, or hopefully the goal bell times, to assess the level of inefficiency. In a Halifax, Virginia report, they specified a ridership goal of 75% for their buses. Anyways, continuing to Calvert, consider options for merging or extending routes and considering the use of smaller buses for low-density routes that exist following optimization. And observe normal operations of school buses on school grounds at least weekly to ensure compliance to safety and standards as outlined in the operations manual, blah, 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 blah. So there's some very detailed recommendations that they gave to Calvert County, and so I expect the same level, if not more detail, for Anne Arundel County. So I think that will be a great thing. I was also incredibly pleased in the frequently asked questions addendum to the bid documents. The question about school hours specified, the response was that all schools start and end between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m., and I think that is a great start. And so I look forward to any modifications that they may recommend based on that, and the orange ribbon for healthy school hours, which has no elementary school before 8 and no middle school or high school before 8:30, that MSDE could award to us. So thank you very much, and it looks like great work, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Van Buskirk. Any further public comment? Any further board comment? Seeing none on both, we'll now move to a vote on item 6.14, student transportation consultant. I am so sorry. I'm moving. Can we have, Dr. Arlotto, your recommendation on this specific item?
Yes, sir. I recommend board approval of the contract, awarding contract consultant services, public school transportation to Prismatic Services Incorporated in the total amount of $135,811.
So moved. Second.
Second. All right, great. I apologize for that. Jumping the gun here. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any further public comment? Seeing none. Okay, let's move for the vote on item 6.1 for student transportation consultant. Mrs. Howell, would you please call the roll?
Aye.
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 Motion passes
8-0. Thank you so much. We'll now move to item 7.02, which is the appointment of board counsel. Can we have a motion, Mrs. Corkadell?
Yes. I move that the board appoint the law firm of Carney, Callahan, Bresler, Bennett, and Schur, LLP, board counsel for the 2019-2020 year.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, this is a vote on appointment of board counsel. Mrs. Howell, would you please call the roll?
Aye.
Ellis?
Aye.
Mr. Brannan? Aye. Ms. Corkadell? Aye. Ms. Palmer? Aye. Ms. Alvey?
Aye.
Ms. Antoine?
Aye.
Mr. Gilliland?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thank you. Now move to item 7.03, administrative personnel appointments. This is an action item. Dr. Arlotto, can we have your recommendation, please?
Yes, sir. I recommend board approval of the personnel listed on the attached sheet be promoted and or appointed.
There's a motion.
So moved.
Second. We've got a motion, a second, and now board questions and comments. Mrs. Schallheim.
I turned off my mic instead of turning it on. I wanted to say that this list of appointments is very impressive, and I just had one. Actually, I don't really. My question was answered in my review. Sorry. So I did want to say that it's very impressive, and I'm excited about these. And I think my question is actually in the next agenda item, so I'll just leave it there. Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll come back on regular personnel. Another question, Ms. Antoine.
It's just a comment. I really appreciate this recommendation, Dr. Arlotto. After visiting the schools, I took for granted the importance of especially the assistant principals to the principal and to the individual schools. This list is incredible. What I've read about the individuals, I want to congratulate you guys for your hard work and definitely impressive. And this is really good. I'm excited about the upcoming year.
Thank you, Ms. Antoine. Any further board questions or comments on administrative personnel appointments? Seeing none, this will now be a vote on item 7.03, administrative personnel appointments. Mrs. Howell, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Mr. Brannan? Aye. Ms. Corkadell? Aye. Mrs. Palmer? Aye. Ms. Alvey?
Aye.
Ms. Antoine?
Aye.
Mr. Gilliland?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move to item 7.04, which is personnel. This is an action item. Dr. Arlotto, can we have your recommendation, please?
Yes, sir. I recommend that the board approve the actions as stipulated on the attached sheets.
So moved.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Now we'll move to board questions and comments. Mrs. Schallheim.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, just a comment. So I was looking through this. You know, it's always sad when people leave, and I did notice some striking things. So it looks like 60% of our resignations are going to be teaching elsewhere, and that's made up of various components, in-state, out-of-state, private schooling, etc. And I'm just sad that folks choose to leave. Some of them with a fair number of a fair amount of experience. 36% of them teaching in another Maryland county. And so I've said it before, but I'll say it again. This stresses to me the importance of equity, and for our continued work. We made some progress with this budget, a lot of progress, and I commend everyone responsible for that, including our county council and our county executive. But this also eliminates for me the continuing work that we need to do and the importance of pay and equity and making up dock steps. I don't assume for a second that that is the specific reason for any of these, but I want to reaffirm my commitment to working on that and getting that resolved in the upcoming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Schallheim. Mrs. Hummer.
I have a question, Dr. Arlotto. On some of these, when it shows like a resignation, we have a column that says total experience, and then we have one that says AACPS experience. And some of the AACPS experience shows 0 time. So were they actually employee and didn't work for us at all? So they may have accepted the position and got an offer at another location, and they turned ours down before they even started.
Correct, or actually didn't show up for work.
Or maybe just
We
didn't
may
get
have
shown.
contracted them over the summer, say last summer, or at some point during the school year, and then they just never posted for work.
Okay,
So they accumulated no time with us.
All right, so they weren't actual, I mean, I guess technically they're employees, but they never actually were in a classroom. Because we do see that occasionally on here, so I was curious.
We do. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Great. And any further questions from the board or comments? I would be remiss. I see there are 2 of our athletic directors. One moved to Florida, Dave Lanham from Severna Park High School, and then a retirement of Ken Kazmarek from Broadneck High School. Both led solid contributions to the athletic program for this county, and I just want to publicly thank them, as well as one other retirement, and that's Pam Bukowski, who those of us who were appointed went through the school board nominating or school board appointment commission, and Pam was a longtime member of that commission as well, and I just want to say thank you to her and wish her well in her retirement. This is now going to be a vote on personnel. Mrs. Howell, would you please call the roll?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, thank you. We'll now move to item 7.05, filling of vacancies on Executive Committee of the Countywide Citizen Advisory Committee. Again, this is a board recommendation. Can I ask Mrs. Corkadell to make a motion, please?
Yes, I move that the named individuals named on the on our enclosed sheet of item 705 shall be appointed to fill the existing vacancies on the Countywide Citizen Advisory Committee.
And can we have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any board questions at this point? Mrs. Schallheim.
Yes, I have quite a few actually, so bear with me here. Before I get into them, I want to say that this is my first rodeo with selecting members for the CAC, and so just bear with me because I do have a lot of questions. But before I get to these, I'd like to thank Diane, Ms. Howell, actually, for requesting and receiving all the applications. Per the board policy, the board has the final oversight and management of the CAC, and the board shall make the final determination for membership upon the consideration of the recommendations of the screening committee, and therefore I truly felt that it was our responsibility really to have all the application materials in hand, so I'm grateful for that. I don't know who to direct these questions to since no one's sitting up there at all.
I was just asking Dr. Arlotto. He said I would have to answer to the best of my ability and lean on him.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and so...
There's no one from the CAC selection committee I can direct questions to?
I was on it, so I mean I can answer at least from my perspective,
okay.
And I'll try my best.
All right, thank you, Terry. I appreciate that. So I guess I know we have some goals in mind when filling these seats, and so do you remember what some of those goals were when recommending members?
Yeah, based on the conversation that we had, I know there was a special focus on special education. I think there were a number of applicants who were parents of children with special needs, and they were, and I apologize for not giving you the exact number, but there were a number of these parents who noted that on their application, and forgive me for not knowing the exact number, but that was something that was a focus, given the increased conversation around that broader topic, or what I'll just call a broader topic at this point. So that was one. I know with regard to the military, there was some increased emphasis on that, not just with the military representative, but there was another through, and forgive me for not remembering the exact system, or feeder system.
Chesapeake.
Yes. So we had a parent who was a military parent, and then the military representative, I know, was one who was an active duty officer in the military, and we thought, while it could be an active duty officer or it could be a spouse of a military officer, that the active duty representative or active duty officer would be an ideal military representative. I'm going to use a broad term that is always difficult to define, and I think probably that third category was diversity. Diversity to the extent possible among the applicants that were presented to us, and again, that could mean a number of things. Diversity in what was presented to us on the application by way of backgrounds, professional backgrounds, parents who, while they may represent an elementary portion of a feeder system or secondary portion of a feeder system, parents who had multiple children, who could speak to needs and broader needs as necessary, that came up in the discussion, and by no means at all was that a determining or final determining factor. But I would say it was a robust conversation. In full disclosure, I only knew of one applicant personally. I did not know any of the applicants on a personal basis, and I want to say that was the case with the others who were engaged in the selection.
Okay. Thank you for that. The regulation also states, I'm going to quote here, that in order to ensure that all nominations are considered to accomplish the intended purpose to comprise an executive committee that is balanced and diverse in every sense, and then the sentence goes on, but that's the phrase I want, diverse in every sense. And so in looking at some of the applications, specifically the Chesapeake cluster, which we all know has had multiple incidents of bias, racism, anti-Semitism, etc., I do see that some of the applicants, at least to me, talk about their diverse community, or at least an interest in serving a diverse community more than others. And so you mentioned military. Is that why this particular applicant was recommended over the others?
I don't recall specifically. I know that was, of course, that was near and dear to me, at least the military background, but again, I don't know that was the only qualifier, and I can't say with 100% certainty, because and again, I don't have the list of the others in front of me. I'm just looking at the list of the recommendations. I don't know the names offhand of the other applicants,
okay.
and I don't recall specific. I don't recall. There we go. Specifics to the applicants that were not selected.
Okay.
And I mean, if I could rephrase, I don't know that anybody was disqualified for any reason. I think it was just among a great pool of applicants. I think many of these were they were difficult decisions.
Oh, no doubt. I read all of them, and I have no doubt of that. So back to wanting, quote, diversity in every sense on the CAC. So I'm looking at the list of recommended applicants, and I read all the applications, and to speak of their careers at religious institutions, under the same sort of umbrella of a singular religion. And I also noticed that there's at least one other applicant who wasn't recommended, but is quite possibly known by the school system because of the multiple anti-Semitic incidents her children have witnessed or been a victim of, and happens to be part of a different religious group, a religious minority. If we're trying to meet the regulation and consider a committee that is, quote, diverse in every sense, and since combating biased behavior is or ought to be one of our highest priorities alongside special education and military, was there a specific reason why that person wasn't recommended by the committee?
I'm not sure of the specific
And
individual.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I really, truly thought
Yeah.
there would be members of the committee so we're not just stamping.
Can I just have a quick point of order?
Sure.
I'm concerned that we may be getting into personnel issues when we're talking about a specific, even though the name's not being shared, if we're getting into a specific person's application, I just want us to be careful when we go into that if we're getting into specific applications and why one person was chosen over another or something, we're moving into personnel territory, I think.
I disagree because this is a voluntary committee, and because as fulfilling our purpose and having final quote on our policy, final oversight and management of the committee and on the regulation, the board shall have final determination for membership upon consideration of recommendations. That doesn't mean I'm not suggesting nor am I moving at any point in time, nor do I plan to adjust the list. But I think it's part of our responsibility to be thoughtful in our selection and not just handed a list of names and told to get on with it. Had we done that and not gotten the application materials, literally all we would have is a list of names and their cluster. Now, I wouldn't know these people if they stopped me on the street because I don't know any of them personally either. And so I felt that it was our responsibility to dig deeper and to ask questions when needed. That's what I'm doing. So to go back to my question, was there any? Do you recall any specific reason why things that might not be? I'll rephrase my question in a different way. Things that might not be like printed on the applications, but might be the names might be familiar for whatever reason. I assume that some of these folks were known to one or more of the committee members just by virtue of being fabulous applicants and obviously engaged parents. Was there any consideration of things beyond what was typed on the application?
Not during the meeting. And again, I would just say, again, a full public disclosure for the board, for the public. I only knew one of the individuals. And again, I did not know any of the other names among either those who were selected to be recommended to the board or among those who did not make the cut, so to speak.
Okay.
And I can tell you during the meeting that we had, it was roughly a 30-minute, 45-minute meeting. I don't recall the specific time, but 30 to 45 minutes of discussion. No individual was disqualified because of, again, just to the best of my recollection, at this time, no one was mentioned specifically, and because of that disqualified. I don't believe anybody. I can't speak for the others, but no one said I really know this person, I really like them, or I don't know this person, or I know this person and I don't like them.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair. And again, I apologize. I didn't know you were going to be on the spot for this.
It was my fault for not knowing either. So
yeah. So I've a final bit to ask about. So last question. I noticed that the CAC application requests some optional information from applicants, such as gender and ethnicity. And again, these are noted as optional on the application. So I want to say, if we truly want to follow the regulation, which again states that we want to have a balanced and, quote, diverse in every sense, unquote, committee, why not ask applicants for additional optional information? For example, open-ended questions about how their specific background would contribute in terms of diversity to the CAC. And no, I'm not suggesting, you know, compelling them to answer any question that they wouldn't want to state about themselves, but just as a way to truly form a more diverse group. And I'm not suggesting that this group isn't diverse, because again, I wouldn't know these folks if they stopped me on the street. But that way we would know for sure, because there is more to diversity than gender and ethnicity, including representation from more than one family of religions, education, family structure, socioeconomic status, ability, and otherwise. And again, if additional open-ended questions were to be added, we might know for sure if we have a heterogeneous committee or not. And so I would like to officially request that we add this policy and its regulation to, I know I've said this before, but I'm saying it again, to the policy committee's calendar for review during this upcoming academic year, including the possible editing of the CAC application.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So, thank you, Ms. Scholheim, for the reiteration for the benefit of the public. As I had noted in my monthly report at our last business meeting, this is one of the items that is on the list for consideration for next year and will be finalized and is duly noted. I also just wanted to say that I was a little concerned with it. I would just like to note in response to some of Ms. Scholheim's questions that perhaps if the board would like to do a formal review of all the applications, a work session or something like that could be conducted. I got to admit, I was not comfortable with you reading a parsed selection of a couple applications without their presence and foreknowledge that we were going a little bit further. I would think the applicants probably would want to know that there was another vetting process to at least have presence, if not an understanding of it. But
it's noted in the regulation. So I'm just following our regulation. Like if we want to get a diverse group.
Oh no, I agree.
We have final approval.
If I may finish, please.
Sure.
'Cause I was the one that had to. Yeah. I would just like to say that I just think that an advance notice would have been appropriate. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do our due diligence, but I think that in fairness of all the applicants, if I just heard one or two being parsed out, I would kind of be like, well, what's going on? It would sound actually worse than what has been occurring in prior. So we can probably address some of the policy in that regard, but I would recommend that for the upcoming years that we would consider, if we wanted that due diligence aspect, that there would be a good way of conducting it fairly and openly, and I am definitely for your recommendation of doing that.
Okay. Ms. Antwine.
Thank you. I would just like to make a motion. I'm a person that looks at the numbers as well, and to have that many vacancies to me is alarming. But to have just as many people step up, it was definitely a positive. This committee is a critical committee to our board, and one of the concerns the former president, as he stepped down, shared was his relationship with the board was a concern for him. So my motion is that we do a reception outside of their standard meetings, that the board does a reception with our new CAC, so that we can better understand the people who will be advising us and bringing key information on how we manage and make decisions for our school system. And I would further add to that motion that that reception be at least by November.
Okay, we've got that motion now and a second to have we'll just loosely define at this point as a reception. That can mean a couple of things, but
In my mind, it's a
meet and greet? Okay.
meet and greet to allow us to meet and greet.
No,
It's
that's fine.
important that, as you all pointed out here, we need to know each other as we move forward on behalf of our school system and especially our students.
Okay.
And these are volunteers, and they need to feel valued as volunteers, and one way to do that is through our networking efforts.
Okay. Discussion on this motion, which is a reception for the CAC members. Seeing nothing specific to that, I think these other lights were for the broader vote. Mrs. Howell, Ms. Antoine's motion's been moved and seconded for the board to sponsor a reception, and we'll define the sort of a general meet and greet, and we can define some of the rest of that offline. Okay? Would you please?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Mr. Granick?
Aye.
Ms. Corkedow?
Aye.
Ms. Hummer?
Aye.
Ms. Alvey?
Aye.
Ms. Antwine?
Aye.
Mr. Gilliland?
Aye.
Passes 8-0.
Okay. That clarifies that. Ms. Antwine, was that all you were?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Grannon, were you? Okay. Mrs. Hummer.
Yes, I just want to clarify one thing. Ms. Antoine, you made a comment about the large number of vacancies. That's normal this time of year because they're on rotating terms, so that as they go off, if their term, their terms are only 2 years with a possible extension for a third year if they want to stay on, and so there's normally going to be half the clusters are turning over each year when it comes through. But I just want to say, as someone now having served on the board for a number of years and twice serving on the committee for the selection, I'm always so impressed by the number of parents that reach out to be a part of this, and reading the applications, I generally don't know or only know 1 or 2 of the people that apply, and I'm always so impressed with the qualifications and the passion for parents to be in there. And it's always a difficult choice because there's a large number of very good people that really can give us a lot in turn. Reading these applications this year was no different. I also want to stress that I know our Department of Family Partnerships, the people that are not selected for the CAC for whatever reason, they keep them on a list and they call them for other things throughout the year. So they're asked to apply for perhaps PIAC or the international students or any other focus groups or things we may have. They keep them on hand because they know these are people who want to be interested, so they are not discarded. We keep because these are people that we want to be involved and be a part of, and so just want to stress that to the public too. And for anyone that wasn't selected, please, apply again, and also know that we'll be reaching out to you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Hummer. Ms. Alvey.
Forgive me for my lack of understanding, but for the CAC, there's a representative from each school. Is that correct?
It's each cluster,
Each cluster,
and,
okay.
and generally 2 representatives, one at the elementary level and one at the secondary level.
Okay. So going back to the regulation that Ms. Schellheim read, I think that in itself, having people from different clusters provides diversity of thought, just to go along with that regulation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Alvey. Any further board questions at this point on the main motion, which was the filling of vacancies? At this point, I don't think there's public comment. No. Okay. Mrs. Howell, this is a vote on item 7.05, filling of vacancies on the executive committee of the countywide CAC. Would you please call the roll?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Mr. Grannon?
Aye.
Corkedow? Aye. Ms. Hummer? Aye. Ms. Alvey?
Aye.
Ms. Antwine?
Aye.
Mr. Gilliland?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Great. Thank you. Item 7.06 is the Linthicum Elementary School Stormwater Management Inspection and Maintenance Agreement. This is an action item. Dr. Arlotto, can we have your recommendation, please?
Yes, sir. I recommend board approval of the Linthicum Elementary School Stormwater Management Inspection and Maintenance Agreement.
Is there a motion? And a second. We've got a motion and a second. There's no formal staff presentation, but are there any board questions or comments? Seeing none. Any public comment? Seeing none, this is a vote on the Linthicum Elementary School Stormwater Management Inspection and Maintenance Agreement. Mrs. Howell, would you please call the roll?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Mr. Brannan?
Aye.
Ms. Corkedow? Aye. Ms. Palmer?
Aye.
Ms. Alvey? Aye. Ms. Antwine?
Aye.
Mr. Gilliland?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thank you. Item 7.07, Monarch Academy Public Charter School Contract. This is an action item. Dr. Arlotto, can we have your recommendation, please?
Yes, sir. I recommend that the board approve the charter renewal agreement with the governing board of Monarch Academy Public Charter School.
Is there a motion? Got a motion and a second. There's no formal presentation, but I know we may have some board questions, but I would love it if you guys would introduce yourselves for the board.
Sure. Thank you. Pat Crane, Director of Alternative Programs.
Kim Jakovics, Principal at Monarch Academy, Glen Burnie.
Dwayne Arbogast, Children's Guild.
Great. Thank you so much. We do have some board questions. Mrs. Schallheim.
Hi, thank you. And I sincerely apologize if this was my oversight. Always lots to read, and I try to read every word, as you all well know. But it says that the contract was provided electronically. Was that to us, and did I just space it? Do we have a copy of the contract for which we are renewing? Nope.
No, it's not in the packet. It just says provided electronically has been reviewed by board council, but
It was. I didn't receive it. Did anyone?
yeah, was it just?
Okay, so that was my oversight, and I apologize. So I don't have anything else to add to that. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Ms. Antwine.
Mine is just a comment. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well deserved. The work in our partnerships for our charter schools, it's just incredible. Monarch Academy is one of the schools that I hear the most about, actually, in terms of our charter schools. That, of course, in Chesapeake Science Point. But the work you all are doing and the partnerships that we're doing within our system is completely commendable, and I'm excited to vote for this agreement.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we have no more board questions or comments at this point. Any public comment? Seeing none. Mrs. Howell, this is a vote on item 7.07, Monarch Academy Public Charter School Contract. Would you please call the roll?
Ms. Schallheim?
Truly, the only reason for my abstention is because I didn't get a chance to read it. It's not because I don't fully support y'all and what you do every day. So it's my oversight, and I'm sorry.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Mr. Brannan?
Aye.
Ms. Corkedow?
Aye.
Ms. Palmer?
Aye.
Ms. Alvey?
Aye.
Ms. Antwine?
Aye.
And Mr. Gilliland?
Aye.
7-0, 1 abstention, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Crane, I had that exact same tie on today, and I took it off and went yellow, so nice tie. Item 7.0, it's true. Item 7.08, Contest for Students, Policy Code JJD. This is an action item on third reading. Dr. Arlotto, can we have your recommendation, please?
Yes, sir. I recommend board approval of policy JJD, subject to final correction for style and format.
If I may.
Can we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Great. Ms. Ortiz.
For the record, Jeanette Ortiz, Legislative and Policy Counsel. Dr. McMahon and I just have one slight recommendation to the title. Just for further clarification, we would recommend that we add academic in front of opportunities, so then the title would be Academic Opportunities for Students, just for clarifying.
Okay. I think that's a good clarification language. Let me just ask before we vote on the final.
I was going to do the amendment.
Okay.
I'll do it.
Yep. I so move to amend the existing proposed policy revision to add the word academic to its title.
Second.
Prior.
Second. And we have any discussion on that? I think this is a very friendly edit, so can we just say, all in favor say aye? Opposed, no? Okay, great, thank you. Any further comments on this?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, great, and we'll move to board comments and questions now. Mrs. Schallheim.
I just have one quick question, and I don't know if we generally see this or not after we approve of this, but are there regs that go along with this? And I know we only look at them as a courtesy or whatever, but can we see them once you all have them?
So this policy did not have any regulations. It was actually very simple. If you turn to your second page, it was a very one sentence policy. So we expanded it a little bit more to be more encompassing, but there aren't any regulations. So we're not any regulations, and we don't have any regulations for the policy.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further board questions or comments? Any public comment? Okay, this is on third reading for final approval. Mrs. Howe, would you please call the roll?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Aye.
Ms. Scorpio? Aye. Ms. Palmer? Aye. Ms. Alves?
Aye.
Ms. Antwine?
Aye.
Mr. Gilliland?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Great. Thank you. We'll now move to second reading calendar. Item 7.09, confidential communication, reporting of at-risk student behaviors, policy code GAD. Ms. Ortiz.
Again, for the record, Jeanette Ortiz, Legislation and Policy Counsel. So policy GAD, confidential communication, reporting of at-risk student behaviors. On second reading, we did not receive any public comments.
Great. Any board questions or comments at this point? Seeing none. Any public comment? Seeing none. This item will be back to us at the August meeting for a
Correct.
third reading. Great.
Yes.
Thank you. Item 7.10 is student behavioral threat assessments, policy code JN. It is on second reading. Ms. Ortiz.
And yes, so policy JN, student behavioral threat assessments. Also on second reading, we did not receive any public comments on this policy either.
Okay. Any board questions or comments at this point? Any, Ms. Alvey?
So it says here the superintendent shall establish at least one ACPS behavioral threat assessment team to coordinate among school officials. Is that already established in process?
So just for background,
Yeah.
Since it's your first meeting.
I know, sorry about
no,
that. I'm a
No,
little-
it'll be
behind.
helpful to everyone. So this policy is a new-ish, technically a new policy in accordance with new state law and the state model policy on behavioral threat assessments.
Okay.
A lot of this context in this policy was already in GAD, which is why we brought it back, even though we looked at it last year.
Okay.
So we pulled out the vast majority of the information from GAD and created JN. So yes, we have behavioral threat assessment teams already. The law says that we shall have at least one, and so that's why that language is in there.
Okay.
And I don't know if Ryan or Kelly would like to add anything more. But yes, we were already doing the vast majority of what is required in state law and the state model policy, so we're kind of ahead of the game. And so the new requirements established by the state we added in there, but we've already been moving in that direction, and Dr. Arlato and Ryan Vogelin and Kelly Anderson were part of the statewide team that established the state model policy. So we've been very involved, and we're basically, a leader in the state on this issue.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Antwine? The octave changed.
Yeah. It was kind of,
So my question is about the definitions.
Yes.
Are these definitions aligning with something else? How did we determine these definitions, please?
Yes, so the definitions are in accordance with the state definitions. For the most part, you will find on page 2 when you're talking about transient/low risk threat. serious substantive/moderate risk threat, and very serious substantive/high risk threat. The reason why those have sort of two names is because we as a school system called them one thing, but the state is calling them something else, even though the definitions were substantially the same. So we didn't want to have to change the terms in something that we've been used to referring to as a school system in our staff, so we just kind of included the state reference to these types of threats. But yes, they are in accordance with what is in the state model policy on behavioral threat assessment and state law.
Thank you, madam. And then I have a second question about contacting authorities outside of the school system. I'm looking here and scanning, but I read last night there was an option for a staff member to contact police authorities or authorities within the county directly if they were unable to report to a principal or someone else or his designee, so to speak. Although this is a regulation, I wanted some understanding about the circumstances that may require that, because just reading it, I don't know of an opportunity where a member wouldn't be able to contact an assistant principal, a principal, or somebody in authority when necessary without reaching out directly to the police.
Sure, and Ms. Anderson can answer that question.
So Kelly Anderson, the coordinator of psych services. The circumstances are, say, after hours, when you're not in school, or perhaps you're on some kind of an after-school field trip or something where you're not present in the school building.
Thank you. So that was simple. I worried about that all night. Thank you.
It's a complicated policy. We understand. There's a lot of details. So.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Antwine. Any further board questions or comments at this point? Any public comment? Seeing none, we will be back on third reading with this policy in August.
Correct.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll now proceed with our first reading calendar, but before doing so, just a logistical detail. I was just conferring with Dr. Arlato. I know we're going to have some questions on these next two policies that are on our first reading calendar, but I don't think we're going to be too terribly long, so just in the interest of time, we're going to power through, and I think we'll be reasonably ending for lunch purposes and so forth. So we'll move forward with item 7.11, bullying, cyberbullying, harassment and intimidation, hazing and bias behavior, policy code JCCA. Ms. Ortiz.
Yep, so the Division of Student Support Services, Office of Equity and Accelerated Achievement, and Office of EEO Compliance are bringing policy JCCA, bullying, cyberbullying, harassment, intimidation, hazing, and bias before you on first reading. The policy was last updated on June 17th, 2009. We are revising the policy to align with state law and the most recent version of the state model policy to address bullying, harassment, or intimidation. We've also removed references to bias in the policy and regulation, and these particular references have been moved to a newly established policy, which I will be discussing next. We've emphasized in the policy AACPS's commitment to prohibiting bullying, cyberbullying, harassment, and intimidation. Some key revisions to the regulation include updated definitions to bullying, harassment, intimidation, and retaliation, clarification in the procedures, a cross-reference to the new bias, behavior, and language policy, and the policy will be on our website for a 30-day public comment period. We are happy to answer any questions. I'm going to just ask my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Brian Bowen, Director of Student Services.
Alice Swift, Director of Safe and Orderly Schools.
Asha Smith, Senior Manager of EEO Compliance.
Maisha Gillens, Executive Director of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement.
Thank you for the overview and certainly for the introductions. We'll proceed now with board questions and comments. Ms. Antwine.
I am completely excited that this policy has come to the forefront, and so that we can really introduce the considerations from our parents, the reporting that you all have done over the last few months, and the real need within our system to mitigate bullying concerns, intimidation, harassment, or otherwise in our system. Thank you very much. Thank you. A special thanks to the Policy Committee for ensuring that we got this up front and early before the start of the next school year. I did, though, of course, have some concerns and questions. My real concern is often we don't get responses, but I can tell you there are concerns out there. We need to, I want to plead to our public to comment on this. Help us to understand what those needs are, especially our students. Let us know what your needs are. I know it's your summer. I know what I did during my summer, but take the time, please, and it was not reporting to my board. But please, sincerely, seriously, this is a critical policy for our school system. It is a tool that helps us to manage something that is compromising academic success in our schools. The questions that I would have, though, actually was in regulations, if that's okay. I noticed that we are adding back the pattern of behavior, and for many of our students that have talked to me, and some of my readings and studies, thanks to Ms. Sowers and others that have been working diligently on this subject matter, it is acceptable, that phrase is acceptable in some cases when we're talking about bullying, but not exactly all cases. So I wanted to better understand why we're choosing to put that back into our regulation, please.
So that's a good question, thank you. So that is actually part of the state law definition and MSDE definition of bullying. And so that's why it is in there. And so, we also have additional definitions, although I do want to point that on page 2 under bullying, I also need to add a pattern of behavior of repeatedly exposing a student and to intentional negative actions, etc., because that's how the state defines it. And so if we are submitting a bullying report to the state of Maryland, that's what they would consider bullying. So they have their requirements, and so between the state law and MSDE definitions and their model policy and the bullying form, these are the multiple definitions that have arisen from all of that.
I appreciate that. So I understand being in alignment with the state, but there are circumstances where these things occur one time and it's severe enough to be considered part of these categories, right? It's not necessarily a pattern. We understand that when it happens. Could we then rephrase, not in regulations, Dr. Lotto, that's your spot, but if we're going to update the policy to say considerations of patterns of behavior rather than saying this is, if it's not a pattern, then it's not one of these categories.
Yeah, and we can look at that because if you look on page 2, you'll see bullying has a even more specific definition, cyberbullying, harassment, intimidation, which don't necessarily focus on a pattern. So if we can, I'll look back to see if we can just stick that to bullying, because even though it may not meet the state's definition of bullying, it could still be considered harassment and intimidation. So we'll go back and look at that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much
You're
for
very
that.
welcome.
And with that, then I wouldn't have my others related to that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. Thank you. Mrs. Schalheim.
Hi, I am delighted about this. I was looking forward to this for quite a while. This is a heavy lift, and so overall I am thrilled. And thank you, because you know that a lot of this is you. So, thank you for doing this work as you do on all of our policies and regulations that come before Policy Committee. I've already started to receive just a few little questions from the public, and so I just wanted to go through them hopefully fairly quickly. Regulation page 2, the top of that, it lists, you know, person or group of persons, and then it, you know, there's a long list, you know, race, national origin, marital status, sex, sexual orientation, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a reason why ethnicity wasn't part of that?
So yes, this comes directly from the state policy, model policy on bullying. So this list here, and so if you see in the bias policy and regulation, we do cover ethnicity in there, and so the language comes like verbatim, except for homelessness, which I added because that in the state of Maryland, it's considered a bias and could be a hate crime, and so I added that to align with state law, but that came from the state. But we can certainly look at that, given that ancestry and national origin are in there.
Yeah.
To me, it would make sense, and we'll definitely discuss as a team about including that, even though it's not specifically in the model policy, because I think that was probably intended to cover.
Yeah,
ethnicity.
that would be great. That
Yeah.
was a comment someone made, and I thought best to ask the experts. On that same page under bullying, another comment someone had was, so we talk about exposing a student to intentional negative actions on the part of one or more other students. Can we instead say persons, which would include the teachers and the coaches and everyone else? And I'm sorry if we went over this, and you know, for the purposes of being transparent, I wanted to ask the questions in public.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's funny because I was looking at it yesterday when I start second-guessing myself sometimes. So this is a student policy for student behaviors. It's in the student section, and that's why we specifically point out students. However, let me see if I can find the page. There is a reference to reporting bullying by AACPS staff, volunteers, or other third parties to our Office of Investigations in the regulation. I just need to find where. And so that would be handled, and then that would be addressed by already existing AACPS policy that applies to personnel, volunteers, and other third parties. Trying to find it for you. Sorry.
No, you're
Just
all
trying
right.
But it's in there. It's definitely in there because I know we did speak. Thank
7,
you.
thank you.
I was a little
I
too
know.
early. Yes, bottom of page 7. Right, and so that discusses complaints alleging bullying, cyberbullying, harassment, or intimidation by an AACPS employee, volunteer, or other third party shall be referred to the Office of Investigations for appropriate action. And then if you see the, I believe and what we can do then to further clarify that is cross-reference the personnel policy, which I'm blanking on. I think it's GAGG, and I think AC talks about non-discrimination, or maybe that one goes in JO. But we can cross-reference over unrelated entries on the top of the first page of the policy and regulation to kind of
That would be
refer to that.
wonderful. Yeah, I think the confusion was like, well, hold up, what about these other groups of people that might, unfortunately, on occasion, have a role in this? So, yes.
Yes, so
thank
we
you.
do address, the adults and just in other policies.
Perfect. That was the only 2 for this one. There'll be more on the bias behavior. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. Mrs. Ellis.
Hi there. Excuse me. I have a few questions that I don't know about if it's appropriate or an opportunity to address in the policy or the regulation, but I want to bring them up to I guess, get your input. And these questions are based on patterns that I've seen based on what parents have concerns they've expressed to me. So going back, I just want to clarify, going back to Ms. Antwine's question, because one of the concerns I've heard about frequently is an incident happens and a student reports it, and if it is considered bullying, it goes on a bullying report, and then it goes through that channel. And then it could be a one-time incident, and then it's handled differently, sort of more in-house. That's my understanding. That's what I've... but intimidation could fall in that category, therefore could go on this report. Correct?
Yes.
So anytime a student has an incident where they have felt intimidated, this is the channel that their reporting would take, correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So in other words, if it, in a case where that's not happening, it's a matter of educating the administrator on the proper
procedures, correct?
Procedures. Okay.
Yes.
I want to make sure I understand that. And then
and also, parents and students have the ability to go online and do the bullying report themselves. So, and that's in the reporting process of the regulation, which speaks to, you know, the student may do it, and I think it's on the top of the procedures where it talks about who has the page 4 there under procedures. So state law provides that a student, a parent, guardian, or close adult relative of the student or a school staff member can report. So yes, there are instances where maybe that doesn't happen and they go to the school staff or the school administrator, but they also can report it and push it through the system, and then it'll come to safe and orderly schools.
Right. It can. I think often what I'm seeing is students go to someone for help.
Right.
They don't know that they can do that, even though we try to get that information
and
out
we
there.
do. We put
But
that. That's addressed a couple times a
I'm
year,
aware.
but you know, there's
It's
a lot going on.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Another question, and here's one I hear about a lot, is a student, let's say, is a victim of some sort of incident, bullying, harassment, and it's reported, an investigation is done, perhaps whatever happens beyond that point, it's often a big concern and very important to the family of the victim or the victim themselves to understand what has happened beyond that point. And so they ask the question, and often I hear cases where they're told, we can't share that with you.
Yes.
And that's why I wonder if this can be addressed in any way, perhaps in the regulation, that when that question is asked, that we have that it is part of our procedure that that student is counseled or their family is counseled on specifically what is in this student code of conduct at that point. In other words, the answer, instead of being, we can't tell you, the answer is, well, this is what happens according to our code of conduct, and we are following the code of conduct. I know it seems, it's just that little piece it's just the communication, and it can really change the outcome, I think.
Sure.
So is it possible to address that?
If I could address, some instances of bullying, intimidation, harassment start at a level 1 or 2, which talks about parent conference contact, minimal consequences, but at least they're being educated about what they're doing. Okay. When you're talking about, say, sexual harassment, victim and fear, you're teetering at level 3, 4s, and 5 of removal for the alleged offender. So I don't know where and how the parents of the victim may be in their process and who it is that you're talking about. But when we have instances like that, we would not communicate an extended suspension to a victim's parent. You see,
right.
But if something required a restoration, a community circle, restorative practice or community conferencing. And the agreement from the victim and the offender was to come together as families and express their concerns about what occurred. Then, of course, they would know the outcome. And that would speak to the lower level tiers of intervention or multi-tiered systems of support. But when you're looking at your higher levels of discipline, I think that in some of the instances of feedback you may be receiving, they may not see that child anymore in that building. The student may have had to be administratively transferred and possibly excluded for a period of time. But to that, we are not able to discuss, their discipline. But those would be circumstances where I think that the parent, the clarity. But I think customer service, we always say, goes a long way. And if parents, the victim especially, and their rights, yes, they have the right to know that something's being done, but the specifics to that, but if depending on the level, they would probably end up knowing.
Right, and I'm not suggesting the specifics. In other words, you don't say, well, yes, Johnny was suspended.
Right.
You say, well, you reported this, we've investigated.
Yes.
According to our student code of conduct,
Yes.
this is how we handle that. And we are following the code of conduct. You haven't said specifically what the consequence was for Johnny, but you have assured that family that
Something's done.
there has been,
Sure.
some
And in the
sort
spirit
of
of
action.
transparency,
And-
professional development takes
Right.
precedence in this too.
And
on
so
moving forward. So
Yes,
And
and
how we
my whole point was, the message isn't really different, but it is. When they hear we can't tell you,
right.
they, I think, often jump to the conclusion they're not
They're
really
not doing
dealing with
anything.
this.
That's
And that simple step, I think,
goes a long way.
yeah.
That's right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then one more question, and this is one that I've heard about and know anecdotally in a couple of cases. But okay, a child is a victim of bullying, let's say. School investigates. We do the and we follow the code of conduct. Consequences are given, whatever that may be, and then everyone moves on. But Janie is still in class with Lizzie, and just because of what has already happened and whatever trauma that may have caused Janie, she still feels intimidated, not by that student's behavior, but by what has already occurred. And if that's happening, my understanding is if Janie's family wants that to stop happening, her only option is to be the one to move from the class or whatever. So again,
I can we don't move victims, and if that is occurring, again, we're talking about transparency and professional development and support. So the counseling support, psychology, school psychologists, get involved with the family if there's some outside therapy going on for that child. But if they're still uncomfortable, if trauma was that severe, I would hope, and if that's occurring, offline, we would need to know where this is happening at so it can be addressed. Because any student being brought back into an environment of where they were harmed and there was no restoration, because there are times when victims, parents don't want to sit down with the person that's offended their child or them. And so when this happens, we have to find ways to mitigate that particular situation and give the support to the victim rather than rushing through to discipline and impose consequences for the offender. Both have to be leveraged so that we show the family of the child that brought forth the concerns and has been hurt is addressed. And so, again, we would need to know, because that's the first I'm hearing. Our goal is safe and orderly.
Can I give you an example?
Sure.
Of
mentioning
a case that came to me a while back, but it was a student who had gone through some trauma due to another student's actions. It was bullying, and I guess they went through the process, and consequences occurred according to the student code of conduct.
Right.
And then all was said and done, and these two students are still in classes together. we've already delivered the consequences to the offender. And of course, we need to continue educating that child.
Sure.
The student that was the victim still felt afraid and had to give up a music class. That was very...
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, do you understand the
do.
concern?
Yes.
And so that's...
So,
I don't know
duly
where
noted.
or how.
We'll take it back. Supervisors are behind me.
Okay.
In terms of how that would be structured, what it would look like. But our goal, if they cannot be remedied, they shouldn't be back together. But the victim is not the one that moves. It's the offender. And if it was that severe, you know, again, without having investigation notes or knowing what occurred, you know, but if the child still left feeling that way, then of course we would need to provide the other supports for that student.
Okay, and I'm, you know, excuse me. This is helpful to me because I think that family should have been counseled.
Yes.
It sounds
See
like
what
to
their
go up the
options are.
chain to get,
Exactly.
right.
And
So,
we'll work
in
with
other
our
words,
schools
I
too.
thought the problem there was in our procedures, and
No.
what you're teling me is perhaps
Customer
it was
service, our
just
responses perhaps, but
right.
without knowing the backstory. I mean, so I'm just,
Sure.
this is a generalization. You know,
Right.
I don't know what the outcomes of that situation
Right.
was.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was going to say also, many times, Ms. Ellis, we put safety plans in place for those students too. That can include working with the administration to figure out what's the best supports for the students, but it can include working with school counselors, school psych, school social workers, just to make sure that that student feels supported. But like Ms. Swift said, you know, we'd have to know the details of the situation, but definitely including a support plan would be helpful, or a safety plan.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Ellis. Ms. Antwi.
I appreciate your responses to Ms. Ellis's questions and concerns because these things have come up not once, not twice, but consistently before and after we were elected. And as the victim, sometimes even these occasions are unfounded, but it doesn't necessarily say it didn't happen. And so those students need the opportunity to learn successfully and safely still. So to hear that the safety plans are in place, that you don't remove victims, that if they are happening, we know who to point them to immediately so it can get resolved, because it's definitely happening, and students and parents are certainly concerned. There was something else that Ms. Ellis pointed out concerning updating the right here in writing how we manage that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. You mentioned levels, which indicates tiering, which indicates, hey, when this happens, this is our procedure. And forgive me, sliding candy around. So when these things happen, you all know what procedures to take because you're superb and you train and you develop. However, if I am the victim, telling me, you know, I heard you, we're on it, just isn't good enough. And if I'm the parent of that victim, I'm going to become more aggressive about finding out what's going on because my child is still hurting, my child is still intimidated, or whatever the case is. So I believe we should introduce that tiering structure that she referred to in our regulations, our overarching policy, so that they can see what happens at level 1. What are those procedures? And then we can relay back to them, your incident fell into this category, and these are the steps we took. And that doesn't compromise the other students' privacy or rights, I don't believe, in any way, and it also informs those that have been victimized.
So our student code of conduct has several pages that breaks down the tiers for various offenses, including bullying, harassment, intimidation, bias, behavior and language, and a host of other things, and it breaks it down by elementary, middle, and high school. So so students and parents get that, because the parents get the parent handbook with that information as well. So that information is available and given to families in the beginning. I think what we're hearing is just sort of tweaking what you would like to see as, administrators tweaking and how they communicate, as opposed to saying, this is confidential, unfortunately we can't share that information, and saying, we are addressing it in accordance with the student code of conduct, which they do have access to. And so I think that's on as Ms. Swift was stating before, just professional development and emphasizing that information, which we provide professional development throughout the year to our administrators. So I think that's something she's noted, so that the next time she's before administrators, that's something that can be raised as feedback. But the tiers are definitely, made available
And
to the families.
I know that they're available. I signed with my son every year that handbook, and we definitely read it and applied it accordingly. We know that, but we are still getting reports of they shut me out. They said it's for privacy reasons or otherwise. So I just don't believe it would hurt us to go back and copy and paste and put that in other places even, so that when this occurs, we have emphasis on this, and we're giving them more than, we're sincerely closing the loop, so the impression that nothing is happening, and then the stories I'm hearing from my child sounds like nothing's occurring, and oh boy, the school system's not on our side here. At least we can safely say we took these steps, and this is what has occurred, and we're here for you for resolution further. Thank you.
Yeah, we can look at that. We can talk to Dr. Alago. We do reference on page 9 in dealing with the consequences that things are addressed in accordance with the Code of Student Conduct. So we can certainly chat with the team, chat with Dr. Alago if there's a better way to clarify how that's communicated in the regulation.
Okay, Mrs. Ellis.
Just getting, back into that discussion. I just want to make sure I'm clarifying that I'm not suggesting that we pull out all that stuff out of the Code of Conduct and put it into regulation. I'm simply saying putting in there counseling the victim on what is in the, in other words, what happened to my bully, what was done. We can't tell you. That's the wrong answer. I also don't think the right answer is it's in the Student Code of Conduct. I think the right answer is just go ahead and pull out the Student Code of Conduct and read that part of it with the student as a counseling session. And it's such a small step, and I think it would alleviate a whole lot. So I just want to make sure I clarify what I was suggesting.
Yes, that's clear.
Thank you.
Okay, any further board questions or comments at this point? Seeing none. Any public comments? Seeing none. We'll be back with second reading on August 21st. So thank you. Item 7.12 is Bias Behavior and Language Policy Code J0, again on first reading. Ms. Ortiz.
So the Office of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement, Office of EO Compliance, and the Division of Student Support Services are bringing policy JO, Bias Behavior and Language, before you on first reading. This is a new policy which has been developed to specifically address bias behavior and language at AACPS. The policy emphasizes AACPS's commitment to providing students a safe and supportive environment free of biased behavior and language. And some of the key provisions of the regulation include definitions that align with state requirements, clarification in the procedures, cross-referencing to the bullying policy, and just as a reminder, a lot of this, or a good amount of what's in the policy and regulation were in what's in the current JCCA bullying policy and regulation. And so while it seemed like it could be, an easy, just pluck things out and put them in a new policy, no, because not everything that applies to bullying applies to bias. And so how the state handles bias behavior and discrimination is different. And so we really had to go through as a team and look at, for example, the definitions. What's currently in the policy is like very detailed definitions, and we look through to see how the state handles these matters, and their definitions are more simplified and straight to the point. And we also focused on what are considered protected classes in the state of Maryland, which is why you'll see a reference to homelessness, which I think a lot of folks are not aware of, is a protected class in the state of Maryland. And I actually wrote that law many, many years ago when I was in legislative services. So that was included in there, and since we chose to stick to what the state considers protected classes, that's why you'll see that particular list of protected classes. And also, as I mentioned, bias behavior, bias incidents, while some of it aligns with bullying and some of it may be considered bullying and could be reported via the bullying report, we also have a bias incident report. We have a bias motivated referral program which students participate in. So it was just really teasing all of that out and ensuring that it was accurately represented. So that's what you'll see in the policy and the regulation, and so it'll be on our website for a 30-day public comment period, and we can answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you very much, Mrs. Schallheim.
Hi, thank you again. Again, I'm very excited about this. This and the last policy are amazing, and I'm delighted and thrilled. Thank you to the entire team. Sorry if I didn't reiterate that enough last time. Y'all are wonderful. Thank you. I have just a couple quick questions. On the regulation page 1, under definitions, 1A, B, just like the other policy, is there any way we can add ethnicity to that list too?
Yeah, we'll look at that, and again, because we pulled it from the state and how the state defines bias behavior and discrimination, but we'll definitely look at that as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you. On page 2, up at the header, the language is misspelled, just FYI.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Under disability bias, I think personally, I know this is probably pulled from the state's definition, but if we can also reference not just mental and physical, but intellectual and an emotional condition, that would be wonderful. That was, again, this is based on feedback I've received, and it's my duty to be transparent. And
sure, I'm sorry, under what definition?
Under disability bias.
Gotcha. So
yeah, on page 2.
So can you repeat emotional
sure.
and intellectual?
Intellectual and emotional, yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We'll look at that for sure.
I also believe, just like on the first page, that ethnicity bias should be its own call out, or national / ethnicity origin. So either its own number, its own classification, or called out, as part of the national origin bias, or national
Yeah, and we'll look at that. And so the reason why we're a little even more specific with this policy in particular is because when we're talking about state recognized protected classes, and you'll see in the definition of national origin bias, ethnicities listed in there. But we'll take a look at that. So the concern is always, if it's something that's protected by the state and then we go above and beyond, that's always the concern. But we'll look at that to see if it makes sense too.
I very much appreciate that. And so this one, I'm not sure either, but it was brought to me that maybe there should be an other category, definitions to include things like, and I can type out a list, I don't expect you to write all this down right now, but to include childbearing characteristics such as pregnancy, childbirth, breastfeeding, citizenship and immigration, status under the law, and parental status, all under a category listed as other. That would be great, or as appropriately separately classified as you see fit.
Right. So again, because these are state protected classes, those classes are not protected by the state. However, we do have, did you say nursing or breastfeeding. We have a policy that we actually adopted, I think it was last year, Asha, policy and regulation providing protections for nursing parents at AACPS and providing them certain opportunities.
Can we, if it's not appropriate to list that specific one or other childbearing characteristics such as pregnancy and childbirth, etc., if we can reference that other policy, maybe under related entries, that might also be helpful. I don't know.
Yeah, and so again, because this is a student-specific policy, not to say that we can't have, pregnant students or nursing students, it's a little bit more narrowly defined than, let's say, if you look at our anti-discrimination policies that we have on the personnel. So we'll go back and look at that. It might just be, and I did actually cross-reference those policies here in the related entries, which I need to do in the bullying. So like GAGG and its regulation probably covers a lot of those things specifically, which applies to everyone, but these are very student-specific. But we'll go back and look and chat with Dr. Lago to see if you could send that list of suggestions. That would be super helpful.
Absolutely, I will. And you did touch on this in the last one, but just for transparency purposes, and I know the answer to this, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. So why just students in violation of biased behavior, but both students and employees for retaliation? And then the comment was everyone should face consequences for biased behavior. The due process would just be different. So.
Right, so the same, and I will try to find it here too. So we inserted similar language to the bias regulation that's in the bullying regulation regarding complaints alleging biased behavior and language by AACPS employee, volunteer, or other third party, which would go to Ms. Smith's Office of EEO Compliance, and you said page 4.
I thought I saw it under page 2 under Procedures D, but it's probably also elsewhere in the due process.
Yeah, so page 4G there addresses.
Oh yes.
Addresses that particular issue.
Fantastic. I believe. Pretty sure that was it on this. Again, really thrilled about this, and very excited to see it now in the queue for eventual final approval. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Antoine.
Thank you. Again, I want to reemphasize to the public that this is available and you have the opportunity to shape the final outcome, so please take advantage. These are sincere entities that can cripple our educational system, and it could damage our students for a lifetime, not just for those moments. So we want to get this right as possible in managing this. I appreciate the team that's sitting before me. I've been able to work with you guys over the last few months, and you definitely work hard. I especially thank you for the homelessness note. Homelessness isn't just no roof over my head. It falls into so many categories, and to find out that the state of Maryland has protected that class is even more encouraging. So thank you for that emphasis throughout both regulations. My only question here would be an understanding of parent reporting. They're on in the center of page 5 of 7, Roman numeral 5. It talks about the notice to parents impeding prompt, fair, and effective action in addressing an alleged incident. Basically, what I took from that was if there is a circumstance where the parents are unable to be notified, we will move forward still. Is that the proper interpretation for this one? Or are there certain circumstances where the parents you've tried and tried and tried, and parents just are not responsive. I believe there are key differences in, I called Miss Antoine and she didn't pick up the phone, and I've been trying to reach out to Miss Antoine over the last couple of days, and we had to move forward with our investigation.
Oh, okay. Sure. It could be a combination of things. The goal is to notify. I mean, they kind of go hand in hand, but there are some parents that may, depending on what side of the bias conversation, you're victim or offender, who to talk to their child. The goal is to find out in the moment once it's reported, because the more time that is wasted, I hate to say, the less information we can get to make the best determination. Word of mouth can get around, witnesses, they taint the information, and then we may have more of a problem. But the goal is to call the parent early and often as soon as we get word that this has allegedly occurred, and that the school-based team jumps in and conducts the interviews and investigates. And if the parent is unable, then the goal then again, customer service, while they're handling the case, then of course someone designated, either the assistant to the administrator, is on that phone, within the hour, letting the parent know, look, this is what's going on, this is what we have to do. There are certain instances where the police or the SRO and the school may be involved based on the information they have, and there's a separate decision and process that they have to make. All this stuff is usually going on at the same time.
Sure.
But the goal is to definitely contact the parents or guardians and to let them know what is occurring depending on what side the child is on with regards to this particular policy.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mrs. Hummer.
I just want to applaud y'all again. I know this has been a process over the past year. This has been going on for a very long time as we, waited for the state to come out, but also, to fine-tune ours. And so I want to thank y'all for all the hard work that it's finally coming together. I'm glad that we are separating the two out and we're bringing added emphasis to the two, and I appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hummer. Mrs. Corkadell.
I want to first thank the staff again. I know this was a monumental one. And just for the benefit, I don't recall if you had said in your introductions about the sexual harassment and the decision made. I thought maybe just for the benefit of record, if you wouldn't mind sharing that. I know you could be 10 times more eloquent than I will be in that.
I'll try.
Thank you.
Yes. So as Ms. Hummer stated, this is something that we had been working on in 2018. We started kind of looking at it and thinking about it during the summer and the fall. And then when the new board members came on board, they also expressed an interest that we kind of held back to kind of see where the board wanted to move, which was where we were thinking, which was to separate the policy, the bullying from the bias. And then the issue of sexual harassment has come up. And so the plan was to also have a third separate sexual harassment policy, and that is still the plan. But given and Ms. Smith could speak on this if I fail to include information, the way nationally, through the state and nationally, how they've been moving and dealing with sexual harassment in particular, we really wanted to just take a little bit more time over the summer to work on the sexual harassment policy and regulation for students. Now, we have something in place for staff that would still technically, could still fall under the bullying and the bias policy and regulation. But we just wanted to make sure we did our due diligence and spending a little bit of extra time, just because things have been changing around the state and nationally and how this is addressed. And so we wanted to have the most up-to-date information. And so the plan is to have that in the fall, whether it be in the September or the October policy committee meeting. And then I think the set of policies and regulations will be complete as it relates to all of these interwoven issues. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you very much. And just on a note, to go back to Ms. Schallheim's comment, where she had listed off a couple other considerations, and I believe I brought it up in committee. And so if we do decide to incorporate an other category, I would like to redress the possibility of including political affiliation or non-political affiliation. We've seen at the national level in the media where people get targeted for that just as significantly as others. So if it is decided, I think that would be a good inclusion. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further board questions? Seeing none at this point, any public comment on this policy? Any public comment? Seeing none. So both this policy and the previous one will be online for 30-day public comment, and we'll be back on second reading in August. I believe August
so.
21st.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you all for
Thank you.
this. And again,
Great.
thank you. These policies are not the easy ones. They're complex, so I appreciate your
Thank you.
your effort here.
Thanks, Dean.
We'll now move to review items. 8.01 is the construction status report. This is just a review item for questions only. Board questions at this point, Mrs. Schalheim.
Hi, yes, I just have two very, very brief questions. Good afternoon. One is on, it's the same question, but one's on page 8, one's on page 14, and it's under status, and it says that well, for page 8 for Hillsmere, it says educational specifications were approved by the board on May 15th, and that the professional services contract for feasibility study has been submitted for approval at the July 10th, 2019 board meeting. Page 14 for Old Mill West says something similar. Did I miss something? Although I thought I saw Old Mill West earlier on the agenda.
Yes, Old Mill West was approved
Yes.
in a prior agenda item.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Hillsmere is actually going to show up in 8.02.
Oh, okay. Lovely. Then you answered my questions. I have no others. Great, thank you. No, we're not. Nope. My only question was like, why is it listed in the... Thank you, Terry. You're awesome.
All right. Any further questions on the construction status report? Excellent. Seeing none. Any public comment? Seeing none. Okay. 8.02, award of contracts. Any board questions or comments on this item? Ms. Anchwine.
So I wanted to understand what a job order contract entailed at a high level. I was a bit confused as to the actual scope of the contract because I didn't know what that meant, basically. And that for on here would be award number 3.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. Alex Shekno, Chief Operating Officer. So, job order contracting, or JOC is the acronym for it, is really a unit priced acquisition element. So you will have price per lineal foot of 6 foot tall chain link fence, price per lineal foot of 4 foot tall. So you go through like a menu and you figure out the quantities. The price per quantity has already been pre-competed, pre-established.
Right.
So it's really scoping out the number of units of each type of quantity. So if you're building a wall, for example, there will be a price per the wall, which is the studs and the drywall, and there will be a separate price for the paint. You have to match the kit of parts together to get the total price.
Wonderful.
So it is a type of procurement, a job order contracting.
That makes total sense now that you put it in that perspective. Also, I'm picking up that there's some product support integration in that there's this centralized contract that we can reference to get our needs when we need it. So
correct, and
wonderful.
it's based on a procurement that uses economies of scale. So we're not the only jurisdiction utilizing this. So the contractors to bid on it are hopeful that they're going to receive a large, a body of work from multiple jurisdictions that allows the price per unit to go down.
Wonderful.
So that's one of the advantages of this type of procurement strategy.
Excellent. Thank you. It clicks now. So with award number 7, I noticed that there was about a 5, maybe 6 month base period for their performance, and then a couple of option years after that. what was the reason, please, behind less than a year on the base?
So we are actually piggybacking or riding a Howard County contract that's already existing.
Okay.
Their contract has already existed for longer. We're just jumping onto the train at this point in time, but it has already been moving for a period of time. So there's 5 months left in the current performance window, and then we're exercising the right to extend, to avail ourselves of the contract extension should that be beneficial to this organization.
So it's more of a safeguard for us as well, but in case whatever contract we're piggybacking off of, we would have something in place for ourselves in those options once the contract's in. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
And again, we routinely, and you'll see this through many of the items, we routinely aggregate quantities with other jurisdictions. You saw earlier one from MEEC, which is actually a consortium of all 24 K through 12 school districts and all of the higher ed, the community colleges, the university system, et cetera. So some of these items get competed at a very macro level, which again helps drive down the per unit acquisition cost based on a volume level that we couldn't achieve should we have done it solely ourselves.
Right. Thank you. I'm tracking now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And again, I was kidding, Mr. Shalom. Did you have a question about Hillsmere? Oh, okay. Okay. Awesome.
What happened is that I read it in order, and so, and I went back and I think I noted that Old Mill was, but then Hillsmere was after.
Okay. This concludes the business of today. The next general board meeting will be on Wednesday, August 21st, 2019 at 10 a.m. And the next meeting of the Policy Committee will be Wednesday, September 25th, 2019 at 4 p.m. here in the boardroom. And is there a Budget Committee meeting? Okay, great. And then the Budget Committee is meeting today, I believe approximately 1 hour after the conclusion of this meeting, or if not sooner. And for the board to know, we have just a couple of appeals that I think will be very quick for us to proceed through. So at this point, can we have a motion? I'm sorry.
What time is it? I'm sorry.
It's 1:45.
So several board members have another engagement. I'm wondering if we need to reschedule.
Reschedule? Okay. Just so Mr. Shaknovich and team know, we're going to postpone the Budget Committee meeting. Okay? Thank you for that. Mrs. Corkadell, can we have the motion, please?
Mr. President, I move that the board go into closed session to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice on a legal matter.
Great. Motion, second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. We stand adjourned. Thank you.